There's only one place you can hear Jonathan Mosen, and that's right here, the home of the fun guys. This is Mushroom FM.
Oh, joy of joys, we've reached the point where we can bring you another Mosen at Large over the next 3 hours. Looking forward to it very much and to your contributions. At 5 Eastern Time, we're back with Steve Cutway as we cut way over to Canada, post-Canada Day for the early years, and he's got some version comparisons for us. At 7 o'clock, Dan Sweeney's in with Dan Sweeney's One Hit Wonders. The Snowman's live with Snow White FM at 8, and Gary G's here at 11.
Mushroom FM.
This is Mushroom FM.
I'm Jonathan Mosen. Welcome to Mosen at Large, the show that's got the blind community talking. And today, dealing with PDFs. What are they like these days? More on advocacy and disability pride, radio memories, Windows 11, and we look at Cleanfeed, a high-quality way to do remote audio.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Wonderful to have you back for another week. It's been a busy one, full of excitement, adventure, and injury. More to say about that a little bit later. But if you would like to be in touch with the show, you are very welcome to do that. Let me go through the ways in which you can contribute. You can drop me an email to Jonathan, that's JONATHAN, at mushroomfm.com. Now, you can contact that email address with an audio attachment. It could be recorded on your smartphone, your PC, say a Victory to stream, anything that makes an MP3 or an M4A file. Or you can attach a Dropbox link or something like that to an audio file. You can also just write it down if you like. We do appreciate it when you put your written contributions through a spell checker and make sure that you're writing in complete sentences. Just makes it a little easier for me. You can also call the listener line. 864-60-MOSEN is that number. That is in the United States. 864-606-6736. And finally, you can comment on various channels that we broadcast through. So you can use the Mushroom FM hashtag on Twitter. Hello, Twitter. Just write with a number sign and Mushroom FM anywhere in your tweet. It'll get to us. There are people who track that hashtag and might join in the conversation as well. If you are listening on Facebook or YouTube, you can also use the comment boxes on those services and get a comment to me that way. Just before I forget to tell you, we have had a phenomenal response to Small World, the kids program for the whole family. We're in the 3rd episode of it this week, so much so that it's been extended to 2 hours. So really thrilled about that, and just getting people's memories of shows, stories they remember and that kind of thing. It's just been wonderful. So on Mushroom Escape, Small World now goes for 2 hours. You still have 6 chances to hear it. It's just 2 hours long, and that, of course, comes on at midnight Eastern Time for the first time on a Sunday, and right throughout Sunday Eastern Time. If you go over to mushroomfm.com/escape, you can find the schedule in your time zone, because there's not much point in having it in someone else's. Howard Goldstein is in touch, and he says, "Hi, Jonathan. In response to David Kingsbury's question about accessible financial statements, I have a CITI credit card. I presume that's how you pronounce it. I can download my monthly statements as PDFs from their website. These PDFs are very readable with assistive technology. They are perfectly marked up, and the tables read correctly. I realize that these are a lot less complicated than tax returns, but it does show that it is possible to create well-formatted PDFs automatically. With regard to Easter eggs, have you discovered the self-destruct button in the Carrot Weather app? I suppose this isn't really an Easter egg because it's pretty obvious, but it's still fun. It's just above the tab bar on the About screen in the Settings tab." I have not been into the About tab very often, Howard. That app is so cool. He's just got a knack of putting just the right amount of snark in there. And, of course, you can control the snark level. Carrot Weather is such a good app. Thank you for that tip.
Well, hello, Jonathan and Mosen at Large listeners. My name is Christy Gilson. And, Jonathan, I've been a fan of yours for, a couple decades. And I think you might remember us interviewing you once about Braille and the devices you use in your life for a podcast I did a while ago. Anyway, I had 2 pieces of feedback for you. One was that the person in the previous podcast who talked about Wells Fargo and their financial statements let me tell you, a little birdie that I know filed a complaint with them back in, I think it was 2010, about inaccessible loan documents. So, the loan statement they send you every month. And they paid out on that to the tune of $10,000 for an individual. I guess that's cheaper than making the forms accessible. So there you go for a little information on that one. The other topic I wanted to address, Jonathan, was from a couple months ago, I guess, but folks talking about using wheelchairs in the airport and so on. Just a differing perspective to offer. I used to resent people offering me the wheelchair, and now I gladly take it for a couple of reasons, two of which are, one, they've been much better trained to push that around and not run that into things than they have on how to guide me. And coupled with the language barrier that is often there, it's much simpler and I have a safer ride. I like that. Secondly, if I get frustrated that someone else is saying I should use a wheelchair, am I not looking down on people who use wheelchairs? Why should it be shameful for me to use a chair temporarily to get around? I don't think it should. Because if it is shameful for me to use that temporarily, am I not saying that people in chairs should be pitied? So something to think about.
It's good to hear from you, Christy. I hope you're still doing podcasting somewhere because you've got the voice. You've got the voice for the podcasting, so I hope you are. And I do remember that discussion that we had. Thanks for the Wells Fargo info. Regarding the wheelchair thing, I won't belabor this point too much because I've got the mic and I guess I've expressed my view. But I would just say that for me, it's not a matter of looking down on someone who uses a wheelchair. For me, the point is that I'm a customer and I should expect that my needs will be accommodated. I guess I would reverse the situation and say, what would happen if a person with another impairment, not vision impairment, but another impairment, needed assistance for whatever reason? Could be a cognitive impairment, any number of reasons why they might need assistance to their gait. And somebody came along and said, I will only assist you to your gait if we put a blindfold on you and you take my elbow, because that's policy, that's procedure, that's what we're trained to do. And unless you accept these accommodations which you don't want or require, then you're not going to get assistance. What do you think would happen? People would think it was outrageous that they were being blindfolded and being told to do sighted guide. Is that looking down on me as a blind person? I don't think so. It's just an expression of frustration at the lack of respect and customer focus of the service they're being offered. Jennifer Dean has a good perspective to share on this PDF issue. She says, part of my job is to make PDFs accessible. I also teach screen readers, such as JAWS. I can tell you that I have yet to come across a PDF that was created by software automatically and was also accessible. Even when PDFs are made from Word documents and have headings and so on, the PDF file itself nearly always has issues that must be fixed by hand. The issue of auto-generated PDF files being accessible from the start is an interesting question I've often pondered. It seems that it should be possible to write this type of code. That said, if they could make tables convert accessibly, I would be shocked and really happy. My best suggestion for everyone is to call the companies they get these files from. They might be willing to have your files fixed for you. If nothing else, you will be logging your issue. And if enough people do this, hopefully the fix will come. I love your show, as assistive technology is my life. It is great to hear from your listeners from all over as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And it seems like we've gotten Brian Gaff started on this subject. He says, oh, don't get me started on these. Well, it's too late. There seems to be no acceptance by those making these that there is a wrong way to do it. So the variations of the worst ones I get are pictures of text, i.e. not OCR read, just a photo, usually a poor one. Columns running together as if it's been generated from a print stream, i.e. no reading order changes in the file. Apparent lack of any spaces when the file is read, so all the words are against each other. Goodness knows how they manage this. PDF forms where the fields are either not flagged accessibly or the actual tick boxes and edit areas do not work correctly. Mixed content containing pictures of words and text or maps or graphs with no explanation of what they actually are. Protected files, so you cannot cut and paste or save the content as text. Saving as text produces gobbledygook. Opening in the Webby text reader for PDF results in junk or nothing at all. It seems to me that Adobe and other creators of PDF need to get their act together and make sure that the user side of the equation, i.e. the creator, is asked questions about accessibility. A guy at the BBC attempted to explain how these files should be made and how to achieve the right effect for blind people. But it was so complex, I do understand why it's a black art nobody actually cares to learn. Thanks, Brian. I have probably 3 PDF reading options, tools that I use regularly. Most of the time I still use Adobe Reader, which I find does the best job with most of the PDF material that I get. And of course, JAWS does OCR on those naughty PDF files that are images, and JAWS simply pops up and says, this looks like an image, do you want to OCR it? It's all very transparent, and it just happens, and a lot of the time the results it renders are okay. That's no excuse, though, and people should not be generating PDF files in this way. I also do occasionally read PDF files in a Chromium-based browser, and I have 3 of those on my system, Chrome, Brave, and Edge, and sometimes they will do a good job where Adobe Acrobat Reader, for whatever reason, does not. And then I also have this app called QRead from Accessible Apps, and that's really quick, actually, at loading a PDF file, and sometimes it produces the best results of all, so it shouldn't be necessary to have all these tools around. I'm absolutely not making excuses for PDFs in this regard. I'm also pleased to report that my financial institution, I bank with the ASB in New Zealand, does a good job of producing accessible financial data in PDF. I just looked at a statement from them, and everything's done in a very nice accessible table, and I was able to navigate that table with the JAWS table reading commands using Adobe Reader, and all rendered really well. So that's an automated process, and it is possible, obviously, because they are doing it.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Some thoughts on Windows 11. Barry Jennings says, hi, Jonathan. I listened to your Windows 11 panel discussion on Friday. Very interesting. And your regular podcast on Saturday. I'm sure that in the end, Windows 11 will be a fine operating system, but the messaging that came from the Thursday Microsoft presentation, not so much. The minimum hardware requirements are confusing for the geeks among us, let alone ordinary users. First, we heard that to install the operating system, a PC had to have a TPM chip with version 2.0 firmware. Then we heard, no, there is a hard floor and a soft floor, whatever that means. The operating system just might install if you have TPM 1.2. In order to have TPM 2.0, your PC must have an Intel or AMD processor from 2017 or newer. As was mentioned, TPM is used for secure boot and encrypting files by BitLocker. When talking to the average user, if you were to mention TPM or secure boot or BitLocker, you would probably draw a blank stare. All the average user cares about is, will this thing install or not? Another hardware requirement that is not as widely mentioned is the minimum requirements for cameras on laptops. As many people know, the cameras on older laptops are terrible by today's standards. I read this morning that the camera requirements don't kick in until 2023. Does this mean then that you will be able to install the operating system, but an update will fail in 2023? We don't know. For Windows 10, one of the things Microsoft likes to talk about is the adoption rate. Years ago, I was a developer in an IT department for a large corporation. In the corporate world, PCs have long lives. In my experience, the last person in the door usually gets the oldest machine in the inventory. The network I was connected to had thousands of workstations. Upgrading was expensive, and time-consuming, mostly because there are normally a lot of in-house applications that need to be tested in the new environment. If you were to look at the average corporation today, I think you would not be likely to find many PCs from 2017 or newer. And of course, with the pandemic, most corporate users have been working from home for the last year anyway. I fear that often in the corporate world, management might just throw up their hands and purchase extended support for Windows 10. That, of course, will affect the Windows 11 adoption rate. And what about third world countries where there are a lot of older machines and poor broadband? Can you say adoption rate? What about computers in public settings like internet cafes and libraries? If you have to have a Microsoft account to use Windows 11 and you are using one of these public machines, is your Microsoft account at risk? There are a lot of machines out there that were built by gamers or hobbyists or just regular users who like that kind of machine. I've heard that some motherboards don't have a TPM socket even if they are quite new. And did you notice that as soon as the Microsoft presentation was finished, the price of TPM chips shot up? I've heard that some places are charging quadruple the regular price for these chips. Again, we're talking about Windows 11 adoption rate. I haven't run the PC health check tool on either of my computers yet. I'm pretty confident that my desktop computer will be fine because it has an 8th generation i7 processor. I have an old laptop I keep for backup that has an older i7 with TPM 1.2, so I might get by with it if I don't get bitten by the minimum camera requirements or some other requirement I don't know about. I did find it interesting that Office in the Cloud will be accessible. That's good news. Your comments about the lack of information regarding Windows 11 accessibility, however, are well taken. Microsoft's PR has not been great at the best of times, but this, yes indeed, it's a shocker, isn't it? An absolute shocker. Thank you so much for that great email, Barry. I believe, from my reading of various publications, that in 2023, that camera requirement will kick in for OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. So I don't think that it's to do with systems suddenly not working if they've got a camera that doesn't meet those specs. I think they're saying that OEMs won't be able to license Windows after that time unless they meet those camera specs. That is my understanding. But yes, it is potentially ambiguous, and I suspect that these requirements are going to have to be relaxed during the insider process. There's too much of a backlash. Regarding the need for a Microsoft account, Beta News, which is a really good site for looking at all these sorts of things, is reporting that the Windows 11 Pro installations will work without a Microsoft account, but Windows 11 Home will not. So if you care about this, then you'll want to upgrade to the Pro version of Windows 11, not the Home. It's also worth noting that after a full week, and maybe a few hours after the announcement of Windows 11, finally, Microsoft saw fit to publish an announcement talking about the accessibility features in Windows 11. And to be honest, there's not a lot of stuff that most end users will want to be able to get their teeth into. I'm very surprised by the lack of new features in Narrator. I thought they would make a real play to be more people's primary screen readers, but it doesn't seem like there are a lot of UI things, user interface things to tell us about in Narrator, at least at the moment. I suppose there is still some time to go before Windows 11 is released, but you would think that sort of new feature set would have to be on the drawing board, and they're not talking about it at the moment. The fact that they keep trumpeting as some sort of major thing, the fact that they have renamed the ease of access settings to accessibility settings, tells you how thin on the ground new accessibility features are in Windows. Just changing the name of a group of features is hardly something worthy of the amount of space they are giving it. So there are some good things, though, lurking around under the hood, and of course we don't yet know how Android app accessibility is going to work. They acknowledge that more information is coming on that. You can read this post if you are interested. I tweeted a link on the Mosen at Large Twitter account. I'm sure if you search on Windows 11 accessibility, that post will come up. Rebecca Skipper is writing in on this and says, although I am apprehensive about the release of Windows 11, at least I know I have one computer that is not compatible, which happens to be my work computer. So I can experience Windows 11 on another system. I understand your initial frustrations about Microsoft's silence on accessibility, but others are filling the void. Based on this, I think screen reader users will be okay. Regarding Microsoft's blog post that they've released on accessibility, Rebecca says the details are vague, but it is clear to me that accessibility is still being considered, though like Apple, Microsoft depends on beta testers. Frankly, she says, I do not think people with disabilities are the primary audience at initial release dates, and the articles provided from Microsoft should have been released a lot sooner. Windows 10 will be here for a while, so most of us can safely watch Windows 11 development from a distance if we are not ready. While I am puzzled at why it took so long for Microsoft to release anything about accessibility, our anxiety over this will not matter in the long term. What matters is the degree to which Microsoft and third-party screen reader manufacturers work together to provide a good experience on release date. What matters is all the feedback from Windows 11 screen reader and Braille users. We should be grateful that Windows 10 is sticking around for a while. This is a refreshing change when compared to Apple. Once a new iOS version is released, you really can't downgrade if you update. The previous iOS version is almost forgotten, though occasionally security fixes are offered. I hope people in the blindness community are not as nervous now given what has been released. Sometimes software releases are like the news cycle, incomplete and better after waiting a little while to see how things pan out. Thanks, Rebecca. I don't know what you're seeing. I didn't really see any nervousness or anxiety about Windows 11. And that's born of the fact that there is a lot baked into Windows these days, such as UI automation, various other tools. So for me, there was never any doubt that we would be able to use Windows 11 probably on day one. For me, it's a matter of respect. If Windows 11 was ready to announce on a given day, then it should also have been ready to announce for disabled people on the same day. Our money is as good as anyone else's. Our needs are as important as anyone else's. You know, there are, by some estimates, around 24-25% of people in the world who are disabled. So it's a significant amount of the population. And to ignore us for a week, save for a brief Twitter thread in response to some of the concerns being expressed, is really poor form on Microsoft's part. What gives me some comfort, I suppose, is that this has been a messaging debacle from Microsoft. It's classic Microsoft of old. It's behavior that I thought was long behind Microsoft, where the messaging is confusing. They say one thing one day, they say another thing another day, they release a Windows testing tool to see if your system's capable, then they release an update, then they remove the whole thing completely. The thing is a schmozzle, and it's a shame. It probably will all be forgotten in time. But what I find interesting about Microsoft is they do seem to go through a boom and bust cycle when it comes to operating systems. We've seen Microsoft OSs that have been absolute duds. Windows Vista, Windows 8. I don't think Windows Millennium did very well. And then they kind of correct themselves, and you have an operating system that just lasts and lasts, like Windows 7 or Windows XP. So you have to wonder whether Windows 11 is going to be the new Vista. Certainly in the haphazard, really disrespectful way they've handled the messaging around this, it looks like it could be on track for that, but maybe they will redeem themselves. I should say that over the week, I did make the necessary changes with a bit of sighted help to the BIOS on the PC that I am broadcasting and recording from now, and it is reporting with the original version of the Windows 11 checker that the system is ready for Windows 11. This stuff is too important to me, though, for me to dive in with Windows 11 on either of my primary computers. Hi, Jonathan, writes Anil from India. It's good to hear from you, Anil. I hope you're doing okay. He says, I upgraded to Windows 11 inside a build on my PC. It's mostly usable with a few bugs, relatively stable, given that it is in the development channel. First, let me start with things which are not working with JAWS and Narrator. I am unable to change any options from the new system tray. New File Explorer menus are non-functional. The Start menu search feature is not working with JAWS, but it is working with Narrator. There is only one new major feature which has been added to Narrator, and that is Braille display support. I am still not a Braille display user, so I am unable to test it. In general, it is a different experience using Windows 11. They redesigned the Settings app, the Start menu, File Explorer, the taskbar, and the system tray. It all feels different. I have excluded little bugs, such as JAWS not saying Control Panel after opening and reading the taskbar buttons as checkboxes. Also, I did not explore or explain every change in Windows 11, just provided some points which I felt were important. Thanks, Anil. I'm interested in your Braille comment because Narrator has had Braille support for quite some time now. So have they revamped the Braille support? Is it different in some way? There certainly was no mention of that in the Windows 11 blog post that Jeff Petty put out there. And absolutely, at this stage, given that it's a very early build, we should be totally relaxed about these sorts of bugs. It's beta for a reason. It's developer beta for an even greater reason. This is going to be a very early, rough and ready build of Windows 11. So no one should expect perfection at this early stage. And if they want to dive in, then they should expect very significant bugs in some cases.
Mosen at Large Pod.
Hey Jonathan and everyone, Scott Davert here, and for the first time ever after this sentence, I will not be talking about Braille displays in this post. What I wanted to talk about though were radio memories. I have a few that I'd like to share. I'll try to stay brief here. The first one, a little bit of backstory to that one. I used to listen to talk radio to fall asleep, and there was a local talk station that you could hear. I didn't know it at the time, but that you could hear in a lot of the United States, but it was in Detroit. It was 760 AM. That's where I grew up. Now I have to turn on the golf channel, which golf is really not my thing. I find it really boring, but that won't even put me to sleep anymore. What do I go to next? I don't know. Anyway, so I used to listen to those talk shows, and I guess I was about 8 years old at the time, so 1989, 1990. I decided to listen to some music on FM before I went to sleep with my earbuds in. And I quit listening to music, and I put the dial on my Walkman to about where 760 AM is. I flipped the switch to go to AM, and I started hearing what I later found out was The Shadow. I'd never heard a radio drama before. And, the signal kind of faded in and out a little bit, but I was able to follow it with no problem. And being the age I was absolutely fascinated with The Shadow. So they took a commercial break, and when they took a commercial break, I started hearing commercials for the Chicago area. And Chicago, for those who don't know, is probably, I would guess, 600 or 650 kilometers from Detroit. So it's a long walk. And that was my introduction to radio dramas, and it was also my introduction to DXing, because I had never heard a station on a radio that I owned outside of my local area. The second radio memory I have is much shorter, as is the third one, and it was much later. It was November 2002. I don't remember the exact date. It was the morning of Election Day for the midterms here in the U.S., so I decided to listen to a station in Ohio to see what kind of perspective they had. At the time, there were still local radio programs. I know that's probably hard to believe for people that didn't listen to radio back then. Anyway, I tuned in to what I thought was the station in Ohio, and they started talking about election returns. So I thought, well, that's interesting. They must be doing a rebroadcast or something. But then they started talking about politics that were relevant to 2002, which confused me even further until they identified themselves. Turns out it was News Talk K57 from Guam that I was hearing. And that was on a shortwave radio, but there was no external antenna, and I was sitting in my dorm room up on the 4th floor. So that was fascinating. It quickly faded out, but for about 15 minutes I was able to hold the signal. And finally, and I debated which one to share, with the ham radio, the one I was going to share was making contact with the International Space Station, which is cool. But I like this one better because it was more spontaneous. I was talking with a station in Israel. I think it was on 40 meters. And the two of us were talking, and then all of a sudden, a station from Perth, I believe it was, jumped in. It was Australia anyway. And the three of us were talking for a little while, which is pretty rare that you're going to have conditions like that, where all three of you are hearing one another. And as I was getting ready to sign off, I started hearing the end of my transmission repeated back to me. And I thought at the time that somebody was messing around, but so I got done with that conversation and quickly moved to a random frequency and threw my call out there again, and I had an L thrown back at me. Not once, but twice. The reason? The signal was going all the way around the world in 2 different paths and coming back to me. I really thought that I had done this radio thing, especially the ham radio side, to talk to people and not myself. But that's what happened. What will my next contribution be? Who knows? The shadow knows.
Gotta get a bit of reverb in there on you, Scott. Thank you very much. Great memories there. Rory Nash says, I never miss your podcast, and I frequently listen to Mushroom FM. A listener triggered one of my fondest radio memories when she mentioned Big John and Sparky. This show began on an independent station in 1947 and soon was picked up by the ABC radio network. There was a daily 30-minute show and a 2-hour show on Saturday entitled No School Today. The daily show was a continuing show centering around an imaginary city. All the voices were done by one person, Big John. Sparky was a boy whose voice was produced by recording Big John and playing it at a faster speed. On the daily show, Sparky spoke in a chipmunk voice but at a normal rate of speed. On the Saturday program, he spoke much faster. I would conclude from that the daily show was pre-recorded and recording techniques were employed to control rate of speed. The Saturday show was a live broadcast. At the time, I didn't notice any discrepancy. The show aired on ABC from 1949 until 1958. The Sparky character was likely a syndicated character. Several records were recorded about that time featuring a boy named Sparky who spoke in a chipmunk voice. Sparky's Magic Piano and Sparky and the Talking Train are 2 that I would be happy to share with anyone who is interested. All right. Now it's all clicking into place. I did wonder if there was a relationship there. Sparky and the Talking Train, Sparky and the Magic Piano, and Sparky and the Magic Baton were 3 very popular stories on Small World, which of course we have brought back. So I have those Sparky stories as part of the Don Linden collection, and on the Small World show of the 4th of July over on Mushroom Escape, we are actually going to be playing Sparky and the Talking Train. So when Kathy Blackburn talked about Sparky, I wondered if it was the same one. So now I'll have to go and see if I can find some of these old Sparky shows on the YouTube. Thank you very much, Roy, for connecting the dots for me. Here's Jeff Green writing in on this subject, and he says, Hi, Jonathan, really like the show. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Jeff. I wanted to pass on some of my radio memories. When I started freshman year in high school, our school was overcrowded, and we went to school 4 days a week, but had to do something worthwhile on the 5th day. I got a job at WCOD at Hyannis, Cape Cod as an intern. My main responsibility was to take the tape of the news and weather and add commercials before and after creating a new tape. I really enjoyed the studio time using the mixers, etc. Well, it was Columbus Day, and the radio station was on automated backup. I went in and found I was the only person there that day. My job that holiday was to monitor our output and change the giant reel-to-reel tapes when they ran out. Well, to my surprise, I plugged in the headphones and brought up our signal on the mixer, only to hear swish, swish, swish. When I went out front to check the tape, I found the automated system was shredding it all over the floor. So I went into the record room and pulled a box of albums and started playing whole record sides, because I was a little afraid of talking on the air at that time. Well, pretty soon the station execs showed up to find out what was going on. Apparently, I was playing albums from the naughty no-no list and sending out bad language over the air. Oops. My other favourite part of working at WCOD was covering concerts at Cape Cod Coliseum. I'll never forget the time Ted Nugent was playing and I had to run microphone cables under the stage to the broadcast room. From there, I had to monitor levels and make sure our signal sounded good. Well, Ted Nugent kept cranking up his output level and pinning our VU meters. This raised hell with our output distorting it badly. Those were great times. Thank you, Jeff. Those are great memories. And you have brought back so many bad memories of old automation systems, long before they were as reliable as they are now, where they just sit in a corner on a PC somewhere. We used to have, in one radio station I worked for, a 6-disc Pioneer CD changer system, and I actually had one of these Pioneer machines myself at home, and you could put 6 discs into a cartridge, and you'd put the cartridge in the CD player, and the idea was that you could put it on shuffle, and after a song, the CDs would go clunk, bang, rattle, clank, and eventually you'd get another song. So it was a way of having a whole lot of discs on shuffle. And if, in a radio station environment, you subscribed to music libraries, you could actually have an automated system that was really basic and cheap, but that played music with horrible gaps, I have to say, overnight. And I worked on a radio station at one time that had very limited budget, and they decided to do this. Now, I did the breakfast show on this station. They call it Morning Drive, I think, in the United States. But I was asked to fill in, I think, one Saturday or Sunday night or something. They were often short-staffed. And so I went in and I did this shift. And then I had to put the automation system on. And I remember putting the automation system on and walking out of the studio, and it was playing the Cascades, Rhythm of the Falling Rain. I'm sure you know the song. Listen to the Rhythm of the Falling Rain. This is the original version. I got into my taxi, because that's how I used to get home from the station, and it was about a 20 to 30-minute ride, actually. It was a fairly long ride. And I got home, and I thought, oh, well, why not listen to the music on the automation system while I'm having my microwave dinner? So I switched the radio on, and what should I hear but the Cascades Rhythm of the Rain playing again? And I thought, that's not unusual, because the thing was completely random. So it's not unheard of that you might get the same song playing twice in rapid succession. So I let it play, and then there was a gap, and then what should come on right after the Cascades Rhythm of the Rain? But the Cascades doing Rhythm of the Rain. By this stage, I was starting to get a sinking feeling about this. And sure enough, somehow I had put this CD player on so that it was only playing one track on repeat, rather than the entire sequence of 6 discs on shuffle. By this stage it was gone 1 a.m, but I dutifully got in another taxi, went all the way back to the station, unlocked the building, made sure the thing really was on shuffle this time. I let it play 2 or 3 songs, and went home again, finally getting to sleep well after 2 a.m. So that is a highly dodgy system. I was actually burnt later in my radio career with the same technology. I worked on another radio station, much better funded actually, and it was a joy to work for. For those listening in New Zealand, I'm talking about Today FM. That's where you would lean into the mic and you'd say, playing more unforgettable music. Yeah. But I used to do this request show on a Sunday night, and it was actually quite popular. And they too used these Pioneer 6-disc cartridge machines. And what you had to play on that station, unless you were allowed to do a request show, was all logged. So they'd have the track name that you had to play and the artist in your program log, and then they would have a reference number like G17. I happen to remember that G17 was Feel Like Making Love by Roberta Flack. And that meant that you would get cartridge G. They were all numbered from A through whatever. And it was disc 1, track 7. Was some nit, some absolute nit. I don't know whether they did it deliberately or whether they had some sort of spillage with the cartridges. But all of the discs had been put back in the wrong order. And so I was dialing up G17 for Feel Like Making Love, and it played Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, which was not in format. Was not. This was an easy listening station. And so I'm saying, on today 92 FM, it's Roberta Flack. And suddenly, and Bruce Springsteen. Oh, my God. So I faded it out and said, well, my apologies for that. We'll just get the right track on. And I very carefully made sure that cartridge G was in there. It had a braille label with the letter G. I pressed disc 1 and then track 7 and said, now here is Roberta Flack. And who should come back on but bloody Bruce Springsteen. So I knew something was seriously wrong with the cartridges, which was very difficult. And in the end, the little hotline goes off, and it was the managing director of the company saying, is everything okay in there? Because, of course, it had to happen to the blind guy, didn't it? I mean, anybody could have typed in that coordinate, that reference number, and got the wrong track, but it happened to the blind guy, so they immediately think it's something to do with me. Oh, anyway, that was a fun night. It was little wonder that so many of us called our automation systems in those days FRED, which stood for Flaming Ridiculous Electronic Device.
Hello, this is Abby Taylor in Sheridan, Wyoming. First of all, let me share with you an interesting radio memory. In the 1970s, when I was in high school, our local AM country music station here in Sheridan, KWYO, ran a Mellow Yellow jingle contest. Now, Mellow Yellow was a soft drink. It came in a yellow can, and the drink itself was yellow in color, and it tasted like Mountain Dew. So, many times during the day, the station ran this contest where they played the jingle, and the first person to call in and repeat the jingle correctly won a 6-pack of Mellow Yellow. Well, I was one of those first people to call in and win a 6-pack, and I still remember the jingle. It went like this. Mellow Yellow, the world's fastest soft drink. Chug-a-lug it, you're gonna love it, the world's fastest soft drink. Oh yeah. Now, the other thing I would like to talk about is this subject of singing washers and dryers. A few years ago, when I visited my brother and his wife in Florida, it was necessary for them to buy a new washer and dryer because one of their machines had broken down. So one day we drove to a Lowe's in Jupiter, and after some searching, we finally found a machine that they liked, both a washer and a dryer. We arranged for them to deliver and install the machines the next day. Now, these machines had a touch screen and all the other bells and whistles, including a smartphone app. Fortunately, my brother and sister were sighted, so it wasn't a problem for them. Fortunately for me, I had packed enough clothes that I would not need to do laundry while I was there. But once the machines were installed, one of the fascinating things I discovered about them is when they were both done with the cycle, when they were finished and you could take the clothes out, they would both play the same tune. And this tune was Schubert's Trout Quintet, the fourth movement. Now, Having graduated from college with a BA in music, I knew this. My brother, on the other hand, with a PhD in physics, was completely flabbergasted when I told him that was what the machines were playing. He and his wife are going to be coming here for a visit in the middle of July. They will have been traveling most of the month, so no doubt they may need to do laundry while they're here. My machines are Amana, and they have your old-fashioned dials. No touch screen, no app, no bells, no whistles, just your basic washer-dryer. So, it may be necessary for me to sing da 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 dum, da 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 dum.
Oh, can I join in, Abby?
Da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum.
I like that movement of the Trout Quintet a lot, actually. I always thought when I did that at school that it really swings, that thing. It had a real beat about it. Thank you very much, Abby. Isn't it good to know that you are educated enough to know that that was the Trout Quintet that those devices were singing? As for Mellow Yellow, I don't think we got Mellow Yellow until the 1980s. And they had an ad for it that went a bit like this.
Look out, mouth. Watch out, hips. I'm bringing the world's fastest soft drink to my lips.
Mellow Yellow makes you feel so good, so fast, from your head down to your toes. Mellow Yellow makes you feel so good, so fast, you just can't drink it slow.
Look out, mouth. Watch out, thirst. This Mellow Yellow's as good as the first.
Mellow Yellow makes you feel so good, so fast.
Oh my goodness, the carbs, the sugar, oy.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Shawn Clark is writing in for the first time. Welcome to you, Shawn. He says, hello, Mr. Mosen. I am new to being visually impaired as of late 2019, and your podcast has been very wonderful in helping me learn the technologies to adapt to this newest disability. I remember hearing you mention how you would like to watch a video with your family where you could use the described audio, but your children didn't. My wife tonight put on a movie for us on the Disney Plus streaming service where it was synced together with my phone playing described audio to my headset and their TV using a Fire Stick having a regular video. Personally, I think they missed out on a few things. I have yet to try to figure out how she did it, but I am certain you could do it in swift order. Please, if you or any listeners would like to recommend any previous episodes of Mosen at Large for me to catch up on while the children are at school, I am very interested in learning more ways to use my iPhone as an assistive device and possibly as a social outreach tool. Being a stay-at-home father did not offer many chances to socialize before my visual impairment. Best regards, Shawn Clark, disabled domestic dad, father of two in Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada. Thank you very much, Shawn. It's good to hear from you. And congratulations on how you're seeking to adapt to your changing circumstances. I'm sure you have been through quite a journey. So well done and all the very best for the future. I am intrigued that your wife got this working. Where you heard the audio description on your phone and she did not, I will have to look into this. I have done a quick search, and what I wonder if she's doing is using the party feature, which is where up to 7 people can watch a Disney Plus stream at the same time. So it's possible that if you sync up using the party feature, and you have audio description turned on your iPhone, but she doesn't have audio description turned on the TV, then that might be what's doing it. That's a genius idea, and I will have a play with this some more. We subscribe to Disney Plus, but man, there are so many of these services now. We've got Netflix, we've got Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and there's so much audio-described material out there. We've come a long way in a short time, so I haven't really played with Disney Plus very much. I will investigate this further, and if anybody else can shed any light on what's going on there and how we make this happen, then please share your secret with us. I guess the best thing I would suggest in terms of previous episodes, Shawn, is that if you subscribe to the podcast in an app on your iPhone, like Castro, which is my favorite podcast app, and of course there's the Apple podcast app that's built in. Overcast is popular, so too is Downcast. If you subscribe to it, you should then be able to just flick through the episodes and listen to the descriptions and see whether any of them are of interest to you. Regarding socializing, there are a lot of blindness-related email lists that you may enjoy being on. Like any email list, anywhere where people get together, some of them are well-behaved and informative, and the culture is good. Others, unfortunately, have people who go rogue and take the list off the rails, so it is important that the lists be well moderated. You can go to toptechtidbits.com, where there is a directory of email lists that may be helpful to you. They also have, on that site, a directory of blindness-related podcasts, so you may be able to find some other material from people who are doing some great work in this space that you will find interesting. And of course, there's Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is my social network of choice. I got off Facebook a few years ago because of its atrocious behavior. I had to get back on for a job I was doing. I've sort of let myself stay there, but I don't use it very much at all. Twitter, on the other hand, I am on a lot, and I'm actively participating in that. And there is an active blind community on Twitter, and you can use the official Twitter app. My personal favorite is one called Twitterific, which has some great accessibility features in there. So there are a few hints, and I wish you all the best on your journey.
Mushroom FM.
Knowing about the right tool to use in your toolbox for any given task is really important, no matter what field you're in. If you're a blind person like me, for example, I wouldn't recommend taking your white cane and trying to hammer a nail into something with it. You'd be far better using a hammer. You may be able to get there with your cane eventually if the cane is strong enough, but believe me, there are easier ways. Similarly, if you care about the audio in your podcast, then I would not recommend using a tool that's designed for consumer-grade video conferencing. It's not that there's anything wrong with those tools like Zoom and Skype. And as many listeners to this will know, I did an audiobook on Zoom. I'm a big fan. But Zoom has many competing priorities. On the audio side, they want to get as wide a range of devices sounding okay when they're being used in as wide a range of conditions as possible. But they also have video to think about, not to mention text chat, telephone calls, and security. And that's the same with Microsoft Teams and Google Meet and a lot of these other platforms which are serving a very important purpose, particularly in the COVID era. Zoom does offer a high-quality audio option, but they set some pretty clear stipulations around it, and they actually say that it's designed for music. They highly recommend that you use it with Ethernet rather than Wi-Fi, and to me, it still doesn't sound as good as the solution that I want to talk to you about today. Now, because this is being geared towards a blind audience, I know that a lot of blind people do care about their audio. That's because we grew up with radio. We care about this stuff. Sometimes we notice things that many people don't notice. If you care about all of this and you want to produce a good product, then you will be interested in Cleanfeed, which is what this segment is all about. Let me first talk about the problem that Cleanfeed is trying to solve, or the use cases to which it might be applied. First, podcast recording, which I think is what most people will be interested in it for. I've been podcasting since 2004, which is the year that podcasting began. But even before that, I was distributing audio on demand, just by having people go to a website or an FTP site and download it, and I was the host of a show called Main Menu, which is a blindness technology show, and I founded that back in 2000. One day, I set up an interview with Glenn Gordon from Freedom Scientific. I believe this was in 2002. Like me, Glenn's an audio geek, a radio geek, and he said to me, why don't we do something a bit special and record our audio locally, then I'll send it to you via FTP, because this is long before the days of Dropbox and OneDrive and these cloud services that we now take for granted, and you can stitch it together. And that's what we did, and I'll never forget it because I was overwhelmed with emails by people saying, how did you get the audio to sound that good? What's the trick? What's the software? And when we explained what we'd done, something that is now widely in the podcast industry known as a double ender, they were all disappointed and said, oh, okay, that's what you did. We never thought of doing that before. Some people who take their podcast audio seriously do the double ender thing now. So they ask somebody to record, even if it's just on their iPhone in the voice memos app, or with a halfway decent microphone on their Windows or Mac computer, and then using a cloud-based service, they get them to send the recording afterwards, and you stitch them all together, and you talk to each other in real time using a service like Skype or Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. There are several problems with this. Depending on the degree of tech savvy of the person that you're talking to, they may or may not do this reliably, and they may even feel uncomfortable about attempting it. Also, the more people you get involved, the more difficult it is to do that stitching together. You have to have some sort of central point at the beginning of the interview, like a hand clap, to make sure that you get all the tracks in sync. It takes some time. And notoriously, double enders can drift over time. So even though they start off perfectly in sync, you find that your guests and you eventually get out of sync, requiring you as the editor to take time-consuming remedial measures. As the podcast industry has exploded over the last few years, we've seen a plethora of services pop up that seek to solve this problem. And that's particularly true in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some are more reliable than others. Some go through bad patches and then come right again, but it is pretty disheartening when you rely on one of these services and you do the perfect interview only to find that the service you are using has let you down. The technology is getting a lot better, although I do find some of the pricing a bit steep for many of these offerings, and then as blind people we have an additional thing to consider, and that is the accessibility of the user interface of these things. There is a kind of a niche following in the blind community for a product called Team Talk. And that does a fantastic job of recording high-quality, low-latency audio. It streams it to a server, and you can install the software on your own computer if you wish. And because it's server-based, you can use it for real-time applications. So you can go beyond podcasting, and you can use Team Talk for live internet radio, using it as a link from one place to another, a whole range of things like that. And there's client software as well that the user has to install who's going to participate in this, and that's one of the biggest barriers. It's quite a geeky setup, but that might not be an insurmountable barrier if you're recording a podcast where your guests are the same every week. You can tweak this for a while, get all the participants in the podcast set up, and then you're good to go, at least until the operating system updates itself and does something to the audio. But if you're bringing different guests into your podcast regularly because you have an interview format, then this is a real high bar to ask your interviewees to reach. First, they have to download something they're not familiar with, they probably haven't heard of it before, then they have to install it, and most concerningly of all, then they have to configure it. Busy people who may add value to your podcast are just not going to bother. So what if you could find a solution that is pure audio, no video, that takes pride in getting the latency as low as you can possibly get it, that doesn't mess with your audio by processing it unless you ask it to, that has a free version that includes an unlimited number of people participating for an unlimited period of time, as well as premium features that are designed for people and by people actually who care about their audio, and all of this is done in the browser, so there's nothing to install. That is what Cleanfeed is, and I can personally say that it has never let me down on any occasion that I have used it. It's used by many professional organizations, including the BBC and other radio stations who have been relying on it heavily during the pandemic. It's used in movie production on the audio side. Many highly acclaimed audio engineers rely on Cleanfeed. I think this is a fantastic service, and when you understand how it works and the value that it adds, I would be really surprised if you would want to go back to a generic kind of conferencing solution and try and put that round peg in the square hole and use it for a podcast or internet radio situation. As I explore Cleanfeed as a totally blind person using JAWS for Windows, I will talk more about the features that it offers. One of the reasons why I'm doing this now is that I've been in touch with the developers of Cleanfeed, and they've agreed to come on our Blind Podcasters Roundtable on Clubhouse. So I thought for those not familiar with Cleanfeed, it would be useful to produce this demo ahead of that happening. But this demo is also for the developers of Cleanfeed, because when I was having a chat with them, they're clearly very interested. They've made several changes over the 5 years or so that Cleanfeed has been running in response to screen reader user feedback. But they made the point that taking a screen reader and trying to understand how a blind person uses it on a daily basis is quite a challenge, and it absolutely is. And when I was working full-time as an accessibility consultant, I used to tell people that I worked with this all the time. Don't expect necessarily that you should have to understand how a screen reader works. Ask a real blind person using this stuff regularly, because it can be so easy to provide too much spoken feedback. Yes, that is a possibility, or sometimes not enough in certain places. The best people to give you that kind of feedback is the end user. So Mark and Mark from Cleanfeed, this one is also for you, with thanks for all you've done, and I hope it gives you both a picture of how we as blind people use screen readers in the context of an application like Cleanfeed. If you are going to use Cleanfeed as the host, then you'll need a Chromium-based browser. Google Chrome obviously fits right in there. I have had no trouble using Cleanfeed with both Microsoft Edge, that's the new Chromium version of course, and the Brave browser. Cleanfeed also works in Firefox, although Cleanfeed makes no guarantees about what happens when you host with the Firefox browser. It will pop up with some warnings, but you can proceed at your own risk. Firefox is supported for coming in as a guest into a Cleanfeed session. It also works with Safari on your iPhone for guests, but at this time you can't host a Cleanfeed session with your iPhone, and that has a beta designation at the moment, the iOS support. At the time of recording, Cleanfeed also does not work with Safari on the Mac, and that does make some Mac users grumpy who don't want to install Google Chrome on their system. I understand a change there may be imminent. It works fully on Google Chrome for Android, so you can host a Cleanfeed session on Google Chrome on your mobile device if it's running Android. And Google Chrome is of course on a Chromebook, and Cleanfeed is fully supported on a Chromebook and works very well there. Since things change on any website, especially something as innovative as Cleanfeed, let me say that this is being recorded at the beginning of June 2021, and I'm using JAWS 2021 with the Oliver text-to-speech engine from Vocalizer, which we got some great feedback about after Brian Harchin's interview, so I'll use it for this demonstration. I may well talk a little bit more about some of the keys that I'm pressing, since I know there are some people who are interested in this demonstration who are not screen reader users. Because I have Cleanfeed Pro, and I wouldn't be without it, I am demonstrating using a Pro account. I will do my best to let you know if there is a Pro-only feature that I'm demonstrating. But the free tier of Cleanfeed is incredibly generous. You can have as many speakers on Cleanfeed as you want with the free version for an unlimited period of time. The audio is not compromised in any way, so you still get the high-quality speech-optimized option, which is using the Opus codec. It's speech optimized, and it's at 48 kilohertz, so you really are getting some very good sound. In an ideal environment, if somebody's coming in with a good microphone, you should not be able to tell the difference between if they were using that microphone next to you, plugged into an audio interface, and what Cleanfeed is sending back to you. It really is that good. But just to set expectations, of course, the audio that you get from Cleanfeed is only going to be as good as the originating audio. Cleanfeed can't magic away a poor quality microphone or crackle in your connection. So many of the same caveats that we've talked about on past episodes apply here. If somebody can come in with a good quality USB microphone even if they don't have a fancy audio interface or a mixer, but they do have a USB microphone, that would be great. If they can come in with a USB headset, that would be the next best thing. You do have to be careful to talk to people about their distance from these USB headsets. Don't be hesitant about asking someone to back off them a little bit if you're getting plosives, in other words, the popping P's, because that will create havoc for you in post-production. If there's no USB headset available, sometimes actually a built-in mic on some of the better laptops or smartphones is better than Bluetooth earbuds. Ideally, somebody should be wearing earbuds or headphones for listening to you on, but some of the microphones in those things are terrible. So you might want to evaluate the microphone options available to your guest, and it's pretty easy to get them to switch from one to the other in Cleanfeed, which is one of its many benefits, and we'll show you that in a moment. But garbage in, garbage out. Cleanfeed can't help if the original source was substandard. I'm going to Alt-Tab into Microsoft Edge, where I'm on the Cleanfeed homepage.
Cleanfeed Personal Microsoft Edge. Cleanfeed Microsoft Edge. Cleanfeed.
The homepage is informative. You will find that Cleanfeed is very well documented. There's a knowledge base, there's a blog which is updated with fascinating articles about what Cleanfeed are up to, and they do add new features regularly. And there's an FAQ as well, a frequently asked questions file, which answers most of the common questions that you may have as you're getting started. I'm going to press the JAWS key with F7 to bring up my list of links.
Links list dialog.
And go to L for login.
Login, 6 of 20.
I'll press enter.
Opening new tab, navigation region, login link.
As you heard, the Cleanfeed session has opened in a new tab. When you log in, and we'll do that in just a moment, what you will find is that you're in a kind of a Web 2.0 environment. Some of the things that are clickable or press enterable on are not necessarily going to present as hyperlinks. So if you think something should be clickable, try it and see, and you'll often find that it is. Despite the fact that I have turned off the ghastly new default that Microsoft Edge introduced a while ago, where each tab opens in the Alt-Tab order, I believe what is happening here is that actually Cleanfeed is forcing a new browser window to pop up, because I do need to Alt-Tab into the Cleanfeed session. So I'll do that now.
Cleanfeed Personal Microsoft Edge.
And focus is placed in the login field, where you're invited to enter your username. Clearly, if this is the first time you've been on the Cleanfeed site, then you will need to create an account. It's been some time since I've done this, but I believe it is quite an accessible process to go through and create that account. So assuming you've been through that, then we're now at the login screen, and what we enter here is the user ID that you entered when you created your Cleanfeed account. It's not your email address, it is just the user ID. So I will type that and press tab.
Password edit.
I'm going to invoke 1Password, which will enter my Cleanfeed password in here, so I will pause the recording while I do that. I've done that now. If you are entering your password manually, then you can just press enter after you've entered the password, and that will activate the submit button, and you'll be into Cleanfeed. We're now in a Cleanfeed session, and we'll explore this, and as we do, talk about some of the features available. I'll make sure I'm at the top of the screen. I'll press Control Home.
Cleanfeed.
And there's the title of the window, which is Cleanfeed. I will down arrow, and we'll go through this a line at a time using the JAWS virtual cursor.
Visited link graphic Cleanfeed Pro. Record button.
Right there is the record button. If you have a Cleanfeed Pro account, then there are several options available to you for recording. I'm going to press the spacebar to activate that record button.
Record button.
And now I'll down arrow.
Clips button. Audio button. Profile button.
So think about this like a menu bar. We've found the record button at the top, and I've already pressed that, but now we're going through the other menu items. If I go back up,
audio clips button, record button.
You don't get any screen reader feedback telling you which of these buttons is currently the selected one. It would be great if Cleanfeed could tell us that, so that when you press the record button, it would say record button selected, to let you know that that's the one you have selected. Also, while I remember to mention it, to the best of my knowledge, there are no hotkeys in Cleanfeed. And that would be something that I think would be quite easy for the developers to add, and it would make a huge productivity difference. If you could just press Control-R, which is a pretty standard record shortcut key, and get you into this record window, that would be super. But we'll continue to go down.
Clips button. Audio button. Profile button. Jonathan Mosen. Ready. Settings button.
We'll come back to that.
Headphones. Settings button. Separator. Connect graphic. Go back graphic. Heading level 2. Record this Cleanfeed session.
So that's an important thing to note. Once you have pressed the record button, as we did at the top, you can navigate to the consequences, if you like, of the button that you have pressed by pressing H to navigate to the next heading level, which is a heading level 2. So to recap, we'll go back to the top.
Cleanfeed. This record button.
We've pressed the record button. Now I press the letter H.
Record this Cleanfeed session. Heading level 2.
And we're right there to record this Cleanfeed session. Let's down arrow and see what options exist under this record section.
Name the recording. Edit.
I'm going to name my recording, and this is a standard edit field, so I'll press enter to turn off the JAWS virtual cursor.
Name the recording. Edit.
And I'm going to type Cleanfeed test. I'll just perform a say line to repeat that.
Name the recording. Edit. Misspelled Cleanfeed test.
Edge is telling me that Cleanfeed is misspelled. I really should add it to the dictionary, shouldn't I? If I press the tab key...
List with 1 items. At day and time to file name checkbox checked.
If you want, Cleanfeed can add the date and time to the file name, which can be a handy reference.
Combo box. Multi-track.
The options that you have here will depend on whether you're using Cleanfeed Pro or not. Cleanfeed Pro supports multi-track. What that means is that for every speaker that you bring into Cleanfeed for this session, you will get a file in WAV format recorded at 48 kilohertz for that speaker. Plus, you'll also get a separate file for the audio clips, and we'll talk about the audio clips later. When you're ready to save your recording, it's being cached in your browser as it records, so nothing is actually stored on Cleanfeed's servers. And that's, I guess, a potential downside. There are some services that offer a kind of a redundancy feature. They upload to the cloud as you go. So if you were to have a power outage in the middle of your session, to the best of my knowledge, you will have lost that session in Cleanfeed. However, there is one thing you can do to make this a less disastrous possibility. You can press Save All as many times as you want once the recording has started. So let's say you've been recording for 10 minutes and you think, wow, this is such a good interview, I would hate to lose it. Just press the Save All button. It will gather the first 10 minutes, put it in a zip file for you, and put it in your default downloads folder. Let's say another 10 minutes go by, and you think, man, I really would hate to lose this now. Press the Save All button again. What that will do is save the complete recording. It won't just save the last 10 minutes since you last pressed Save, because that would be unwieldy, wouldn't it? You'd have to piece them all together for every time you pressed Save. Cleanfeed's much smarter than that. It will just save again, starting from the beginning of the recording. So if you get into the habit of saving regularly, you will make sure you have a recording at the end of the process, even if you lose the end due to some unforeseen circumstance, like a power outage. I'm going to navigate now what the other options are. We'll go to the top of the list by pressing Home.
My audio only.
And that will record just your audio. If we down arrow,
Guests only.
you will record just the guest. Now, I can definitely see a use for that if you want to, for whatever reason, record your own audio locally and just record the guests. You can do that as well. While we are talking about backups, I should say that one thing that I do quite a lot is record from within Cleanfeed itself. And I've never had a recording lost so far. I'm knocking on the wood rather hard on that one. But I also record in Reaper, and I'm using a Focusrite 8i6 audio interface, and that has a feature called Loopback. So I have Cleanfeed set to a particular channel on that Focusrite 8i6 that my Loopback feature is monitoring. What it essentially means is that I can make a backup recording of Cleanfeed in Reaper, just in case. And because what I'm hearing in my headphones is exactly what's being recorded, the quality of what I get back from Loopback in the Focusrite is every bit as good as what Cleanfeed will give me when I download the recording. Of course, what the Loopback won't give me is multitrack. There are all sorts of advantages of the multitrack feature, which is a pro feature. For example, if you've got 3 or 4 people, you're talking to them, and somebody's guide dog barks in the background, or somebody chooses to have a good old cough when they're not speaking, then if you bring it into a multi-track editor, you can just mute that track at the appropriate time, delete the dog bark or the cough without it affecting anybody else who's speaking. But if you have only a single track recording, where all of your speakers are only in one track, you can't do that. You either have to leave it in or edit the whole thing out and potentially miss something of significance that an interviewee is saying. But anyway, so we are on
Guests only.
Guests only, and I will down arrow.
Everyone.
And you can do this, of course, even in the free Cleanfeed. If you've got 5, 6, 7 speakers and you want to talk for 2 hours, you can do that for free. You just get one file at the end of the process.
Stereo split.
This will record you on one channel of a stereo file and your guests in another channel of a stereo file. So it's not quite as good as multi-track, but it is better than a single track file.
Multi-track.
There's the gold standard, the multi-track. And that's all. So multi-track is at the bottom of the list. I'll press the tab key.
Record button.
And there is the record button. So you do have to press this, and then you will start recording. I'm going to do that now. So I'll press the spacebar on the record button.
Cleanfeed.
What's happened now is that I'm at the top of the screen again. So I'm going to navigate by heading.
No headings.
And there is no heading anymore. So how do I find out how the recording is going?
No regions.
There's no regions either, but there is something that you can do, and I must say that this is a keystroke that I had forgotten about until a couple of other Cleanfeed users mentioned this to me as a handy workaround. JAWS does have a command where you can navigate between graphics. It's a navigation quick key, and it is G for graphic, because we do now have a graphic on the screen that is a record button. If I go to the top of the screen and press the letter G,
Cleanfeed Pro visited link graphic.
I think that is just a decorative graphic, but if I press G again,
recording graphic,
and now we have a recording graphic, and that confirms that we are indeed recording, but it also puts us in the right place to check on the recording.
Cleanfeed test 115.
And now the counter is going up. I can actually see that going up on the braille display.
121.
There we go, and I'm performing a say line, and it's confirming
125
that the time is going up. If I down arrow,
save all button.
You can save all.
Discard this recording button unavailable.
You can discard the recording.
Discard this recording button unavailable. Jonathan Mosen. Save button. Recording button. Clips. Save button. Recording button.
So this part of the screen is rather like navigating through your door, such as Reaper. And you're seeing each track here, and whether it's recording or not. In other words, really, whether it's armed or not. You heard it say recording graphic. Usually, in Cleanfeed, when something says graphic like that, even though it doesn't appear as a hyperlink or a button, it is actually clickable. So if you press the spacebar on that recording graphic, it will pause the recording. And you'll be able to verify that the recording is paused. It'll tell you that, and the time counter will stop going up. Press the recording graphic again to resume recording. When you have multiple guests on a Cleanfeed session, you can actually stop recording any of those guests. Now that may sound counterintuitive, and of course you have to be really careful about this, but the logic behind it is that since you're going to get 48 kilohertz wave files at the end, you don't want to be recording anybody who doesn't need to be recorded. Who mightn't need to be recorded? Well, I can immediately think of a few examples. I've interviewed senior executives or politicians who have minders, PR people, on the call when I do the interview in case their charge says something stupid and they want to intervene. Now, you don't want to record that person. You don't want to have a large track, especially in a lengthy interview, that you're not going to use in your production. So they can be on the call, but you can turn the recording feature off if you wish. Just be really careful that you are pressing the button to stop recording on the guest that you don't actually want recorded. Once you choose to stop recording a guest, or for that matter the clips track, you don't keep any of it. So if it takes you a couple of minutes to go to the clips track or input and deselect it for recording by pressing the stop recording button, you won't get any track from the clips at all. If I press space on the recording button,
not recording button.
As we moved around the screen, you will have heard reference to a save button and a save all button. So you can save individual tracks. It's really important to understand that if you want to save this zip file with all of your participants in it, you'll need to press the save all button.
Save all button.
If I do that,
Cleanfeed. Downloading. Cleanfeed test set 1018.zip, 36.1 megabytes. Downloads completed.
And people often say to me, wow, the downloads are so fast on Cleanfeed. That's because everything's being cached on your local device anyway. It's being streamed to your local machine. So when you perform a save all, it's copying that to your downloads folder and you're good to go. But being able to save individual guests or tracks is another way around only getting the guests that you want. So if you're a little bit nervous about deselecting the wrong guest, then you can just go back and save the tracks you want and then go in and make sure that you do have the tracks that you need. There is a disk cost though. Even if you don't save all the files at the end of the process, all these tracks are being saved to disk. They're being cached temporarily. So if you're low on disk space or you're worried about the resources it consumes, then definitely deselecting the recording of people you don't need to record is a good idea, including the clips track if you're not using it. Let's go to File Explorer.
File Explorer.
And I'll go to the Downloads folder.
Downloads. Downloads.
And right at the top,
not selected Cleanfeed test set 1018.zip.
And there it is. There's my file that we just recorded. Pretty slick. Now I'm going to Alt-Tab back into Cleanfeed.
Cleanfeed Personal Microsoft Edge.
Another trick that may not be evident for screen reader users is that when you find the name of somebody in a Cleanfeed session, that is also actionable. So I'm going to search for the word Mosen in JAWS. I'll press Ctrl F.
JAWS find dialog.
And find Mosen, M-O-S-E-N, and press Enter.
Jonathan Mosen.
And it says my name.
Ready. Jonathan Mosen.
If I press the spacebar on my name, and we'll try it again.
Prof. Jonathan Mosen.
And the next line now, instead of saying ready, says
muted.
I've muted myself. This is very handy if you find that there is a speaker where there's a lot of noise coming in, particularly in a live environment, or where you haven't paid for Cleanfeed Pro. It's not so bad if you have a multi-track session because you know that you can clean this up in your post-production process. But if somebody's really messing with something live and you know where the audio is coming from, then you can just mute that person temporarily and then unmute them. So as the host, you have that control. I just
Jonathan Mosen.
Press the spacebar.
Jonathan Mosen. Ready.
Now, if I press the spacebar on the ready line, does that work as well?
Ready.
No.
Blank.
So you do have to go up.
Jonathan Mosen.
And press space. So again, if there was some sort of live region, it would be great if when you pressed the spacebar it said Jonathan Mosen muted or ready just by pressing the spacebar. But at the moment, I'm getting no speech feedback, so I do have to go down
ready
and just verify that I have once again unmuted myself. Let's go back to the top of the screen by performing a Control Home.
Cleanfeed.
And down arrow.
Visited link grab record but clips button.
And now I'm going to press the spacebar on the clips button.
Cleanfeed. Clips button.
Now, if the normal paradigm follows, we should be able to press an H to navigate to the heading level.
No headings.
And no, unfortunately, in this instance, when you bring up the clips screen, there is not that consistency there. Even though there was a heading level 2 to denote the beginning of the recording process, there is not one for the clips user interface, and
no regions.
There are no regions. In fact, I don't believe that Cleanfeed is using any ARIA regions at all at the moment. However, our handy-dandy graphic hotkey can help, so I'm just going to go to the top of the screen.
Cleanfeed.
And now I'll press G.
Cleanfeed Pro visited link graphic.
I'll press G again.
Recording graphic.
And that's the recording graphic that we just explored before because we are still recording.
Discard this recording button unavailable.
And I'm navigating by graphic, so I'll press G again.
Load clip graphic.
And here we have the load clip graphic. So this does take us to where we need to be to start exploring the clips interface. The purpose of this is that you can load little jingles, intros, outros, anything that you want in here, and play them in your Cleanfeed session. Why? Well, everybody in your Cleanfeed session then hears them, so it's kind of cool to insert some applause, or maybe you just want some music like a theme. It's a way of doing the whole thing from Cleanfeed. Another use case that I can think of is if you're a journalist and perhaps you're coming into an interview in a radio station that you work for or freelance for, you can line up some of those actuality recordings and then just play them from here. Again, keyboard support for these clips would be so cool. If you could just be anywhere on the Cleanfeed user interface and press, say, I don't know, Control-Alt-1 for the first clip and know that it's going to play, then that would just be absolutely sweet. But let's see how far we can go with this clips interface.
Load clip graphic.
Here's a graphic that says load clip, and even though we're getting no indication that it's a button or that it's actionable, it actually is. So if I press the space bar,
Open dialog, file name, edit combo, alt.
now you're in the standard Windows open file dialog. And from here, you can navigate anywhere you want to be and load a clip. So in my case, I'm going to load the intro and the outro that we use for some of the Blind Podmaker episodes, particularly the Blind Podcasters Round Table. Given that I'm an old DOS geek from way back, I'm going to type in as much of the path as I can. That'll do. Yeah, that sped us way up.
Items view not select.
And now we'll go to...
Not selected the Blind Podmaker. 10 how
Yep,
the blind.
there's the Blind Podmaker.
Not selected. Better move along 60 bat 012301.
That's the intro.
Better.
So I'll press enter to load that.
Cleanfeed camera or microphone recording Microsoft Edge unavailable. Load clip graphic.
If I up arrow now,
60 012301. Better move along 60 bat 0123.
there it is.
Load clip graphic.
And we'll go and load a second clip so we know what happens when we have two.
Open dialog, file name,
Now I'll shift tab.
item, not select. Better move along sting bat 012501.wav.
And we'll press enter.
Cleanfeed camera or microphone recording Microsoft Edge unavailable. Combo box, 0.
That combo box, by the way, which now has focus, allows us to set the volume for this clip. So if I up arrow,
Plus 1 dB.
it's going up basically 1 dB at a time.
Plus 2 dB. Plus 1 dB, 0.
And its default, of course, is 0 dB. We can go down
Minus 1 dB. Minus 2 dB.
all the way down to
Minus 18 dB.
minus 18 dB. Whoa, okay.
Zero. Plus 3 dB. Plus 1 dB, 0.
So now we've loaded a couple of clips.
Load clip, 012501.
If I press the spacebar on this, I press the spacebar again. So that's the outro, which I really need to make sure fades in, don't I? So if we go up,
Better move along sting bat 016001. Better move along 60 bat 012301.
and now I press the spacebar, you will hear that this is the intro. So if you want to use this, I think the best way to do it at the moment is to load the clips. That's pretty easy to do, actually. And then you will need to navigate to the clips button and press that and do a JAWS find for the clip that you're looking for. So make sure you give it a unique name that's easy to find and then press enter. So from a productivity point of view, I'm sure that the workflow could be improved. But it's pretty cool that this is actually accessible, not necessarily efficient yet, but accessible, and that you can play these clips down the Cleanfeed session to people. Let's go back to the top of the screen.
Cleanfeed.
You can see we're working our way through this little menu at the top. So we've done
Record
record. We then did
Clips button.
clips, and the next one
Audio button.
is audio. This is where we can start geeking out a little bit because Cleanfeed gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of your audio settings. So I'll press the space bar.
Audio button.
And now the audio button is activated. Can we now navigate by heading?
Remote audio quality heading level 2.
Yes, we can. So this time the heading level 2 is back and we can go to remote audio quality first. Let's down arrow and take a look.
Change the settings used on the network for remote audio. Combo box speech optimized.
Speech optimized is usually what you want. This will be mono. You can change this though. I'll press enter.
Combo box speech optimized.
If you're having some sort of issue with bandwidth, maybe you're on a really bad hotel connection or something like that, although I have to say Opus is pretty resilient, but you can go back one
Low quality talkback.
and go to low quality talkback.
Speech optimized.
Speech optimized is the default and it's what most people will use and it sounds fantastic as we will hear later.
Music optimized.
This is music optimized.
256 kbps mono. 320 kbps stereo.
Now, 320 kbps stereo, particularly in Opus, is just remarkable quality. So if you've got the bandwidth to sustain it, and we've got a gigabit connection here, you can send really good quality music through Cleanfeed with minimal latency. I know that there are use cases where people are using this to send professionally produced concerts to a studio or somewhere to be recorded. So we're talking serious commercial professional grade audio here. I'll go back.
200 music optimized. Speech optimized.
And leave it on speech optimized, which is the default.
Virtual PC.
When we chose the audio button, a little sub-menu popped up whose default is the remote audio quality. So when we navigated to the only heading on the page right now, which is a heading level 2, we bypassed that sub-menu that has appeared on the screen, and we got straight to the remote audio quality, which does lead some people to miss that sub-menu, which is actually quite important. So I will go back to the heading level 2.
Remote audio.
And this time I'm going to work my way backwards.
Source devices black right pointing pointer source devices button. Playback black right pointing pointer playback button.
So when I press the playback button, you should find that the heading changes.
Playback heading level 2.
And indeed it has. I would emphasize that if this sounds a bit complicated, remember that what we're looking at here is setup. Most people, once they have the devices and the quality set up the way they like it, just go in here and did what we initially did. Press record, make sure that the record options are set to your liking, and go. So there is an element of sort of one-off or very occasional setup with all of this.
List of 1 items. Auxiliary outputs optionally mirror each guest to an audio device checkbox not checked.
This is one of those features where when I explain it, if it'll add value for you, you'll immediately understand what it does and you'll think, wow, that is huge, because it is huge. When you check this box, all of your Cleanfeed guests will come through the output you specify in the headphone settings option. However, you will find additional options associated with each of your guests, rather like the options that exist for you as the host. The way this is laid out, whether you have this checkbox that I'm talking about checked or not, is that if you've got the recording section visible on the screen, you can see each guest, whether they're being recorded or not, and all the save buttons that we looked at earlier. And below that, you will find on the dashboard a series of options for each guest, including yourself. And you will find a settings button for each guest. When you press that button, you expose some controls, and the first thing that you will notice, you can actually see, but of course not change, the device that they're using for their input. I had an example earlier in the week where this was really handy. So I had a guest who absolutely was certain that they were using a microphone headset, and I know enough to know from the sound of what they were doing that they were not. They were using a laptop built-in microphone. They may be wearing the headset, but the wrong input was selected. But with this box checked, I was able to see that they were in fact using the built-in microphone, and I was able to guide them about how to choose the correct microphone. You also have some control of the volume of each guest. But when you check this box, the one that we're looking at now, you can mirror the audio of a specific guest to a specific audio device. Why is this important? Well, in my case, I've got access to a lot of playback devices coming through my mixer. And while I wouldn't bother playing with this feature if I'm just recording something for a podcast where I can equalize and mix things post-production, if I'm doing live work, which I sometimes do with Cleanfeed, it is super cool to have each guest on their own fader on my mixer because I'm routing them to different audio devices, because I can control their volume independently and I can pan them independently to create a lovely stereo mix. This is an amazing feature, especially for live work.
List end. It is not recommended to switch device during live user recording.
And that's the only option that is here. So if I go back,
source devices black right pointing pointer source devices button.
We can choose source devices. I'll press the space bar on that. And again, what should happen now is that I can go to that heading level.
Wrapping to top, local audio sources heading level 2.
And here's the heading level 2 for local audio sources. I get many inquiries from people who are reluctant, for whatever reason, to buy an audio interface and get peripherals like microphones that have an XLR plug on them. And XLR connectors are common on higher-end microphones, although you can get some very good quality mics like the Samson Q2U, which I often mention on this show, which does both USB and XLR at a reasonable price. But anyway, so many people have said to me over the years, can I record with 2 USB microphones at the same time? I got a couple hanging around. Maybe I have a USB headset and a microphone and I just want to get it done. And usually the answer is no, certainly in Windows at any rate. Cleanfeed makes this possible. And what this means is that there may be some use cases where you want to record with Cleanfeed even when all your guests are local because you're using all your USB devices. And depending on the setup that you have, it's also potentially a way to record screen reader demos really well, because you could record yourself in one track and you could record your screen reader in another track. That will depend on your configuration. If you have an audio interface with a lot of inputs, then this also opens up so many cool possibilities. I have not seen anything else like this, certainly not that's accessible. It really is cool. Anyway, I'll stop waxing lyrically about it and show it to you. I'm going to navigate to a combo box by pressing C.
The number of capture devices, such as microphones or line input. Combo box, 1.
That's the default. Usually you're only going to record from one USB source. And you can choose that source by going up, and we'll show you that in a little bit. But you can select more. I'll down arrow.
Combo box.
How far can we go?
4.
You can actually go up to 4 different USB sources. I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to set it to 2.
3, 2, virtual PC.
I'm back in the virtual PC cursor mode in JAWS now. And things have happened at the top of the Cleanfeed interface because I have changed from one USB source to 2. I'll go to the top of the screen by pressing Control Home.
Cleanfeed.
And now I'm going to search for my name.
JAWS find dialog.
I'm going to just type Mosen, M-O-S-E-N, which is of course my last name.
2. Virtual
Let's see.
Profile but Jonathan Mosen. Ready.
If I search for my name again.
Jonathan Mosen.
Whoa, I'm there a second time.
Muted.
Imagine that. I'm cloned, but this one is muted. So what's happened here? Well, for every USB source that you create, you will have another instance of yourself in this list, because this list that we're looking at now is where the speakers appear. If we had 5 or 6 remote guests coming in here, you would also see these people here. You'd be able to adjust their volume, do a range of other things pertaining to them. In this case, we now have 2 local sources, one of which is not muted and the other one is. Why is the second one that we just created muted? Because there's a possibility that you could be using the same source and that can create all sorts of havoc. So the top one is set to use an option in my Focusrite where I have my Heil PR40 going directly into it. It bypasses the mixer and just gives pure microphone audio. I do that for a variety of reasons, in particular when I'm doing mix-minus type arrangements, if I'm doing Clubhouse things. So here's the second instance, and what I'd like to do is set this to the Focusrite loopback input. This is so that we can hear JAWS, because I currently have JAWS coming through the Focusrite loopback mode for the purposes of recording this demo. So I'm going to find the settings button for the second instance of me.
Muted. Settings button.
There's the settings button. I will press the space bar.
Settings button.
And we'll find the combo box.
Combo box. Use browser setting.
And it defaults to the browser setting, which is fair enough. But I want to set it to the loopback.
Combo box.
I pressed enter to turn forms mode on.
Loopback L plus R Focusrite USB audio.
And the combo box accepts first letter navigation, so I've got a lot of USB devices here that are audio, so I just press the letter L to get to loopback, and that's done.
Virtual PC.
But if I go up...
Settings button. Muted.
I'm still muted.
Jonathan Mosen.
So I need to press the space bar on my name.
Cleanfeed.
And now if I just go back and search...
Jonathan Mosen. Jonathan Mosen. Ready. Settings button. Combo box loopback L plus R Focusrite USB audio.
Perfect. And then if I go back up...
Jonathan Mosen.
That's the first instance of me.
Ready. Settings button. Combo box analog 3 plus for Focusrite USB audio.
And there we go. Everything is set up the way I want it to. What this means is that when I do a recording, I should end up with 3 tracks if it's all working properly. One with my microphone audio from my Heil PR40, the other one with JAWS in it, and of course the third one with the clips. So let's try this. I'm going to find the record button.
Record button.
And press the space bar.
Name the recording idiot.
Local test Cleanfeed.
Name the recording edit local test Cleanfeed.
And now we'll press tab.
List with 1 items. At day and time to file name checkbox checked.
And now
combo box. Multitrack.
So we'll leave it on multi-track, which will create a file for each of these.
Search. Record a separate file for a record button.
And we'll press record button.
Echo. Recording graphic.
And we should see
Local test Cleanfeed. 008. Save all button. Discard this recording button. Jonathan Mosen. Save button. Recording button. Jonathan Mosen 2. Save button. Recording button. Clips. Save button. Recording button. Separator.
Welcome. This is me testing on Cleanfeed, and now what I'm going to do is press Insert with T, the JAWS title key.
Cleanfeed camera or microphone recording Microsoft Edge.
And all being well, it should be recording this.
11:11 a.m.
Marvelous. Now I'm going to save all.
Record clips but audio but profile settings but save all button.
There's the save all button. We'll press that.
Cleanfeed. Downloading 28.8 megabytes. Local test Cleanfeed sat 1110.zip. Left brace focusable. Select. Yes, left brace download complete. Local test.
Download is complete. What I'm going to do now is bring all of this into Reaper and just play that little bit back to you. So what you're hearing next is what came from Cleanfeed and that recording. Welcome. This is me testing on Cleanfeed, and now what I'm going to do is press Insert with T, the JAWS title key.
Cleanfeed camera or microphone recording Microsoft Edge.
And all being well, it should be recording this.
11:11 a.m.
Marvelous. Now I'm going to save all.
Record clips but audio but profile settings but save all button.
There's the save all button. We'll press that. So that was what Cleanfeed recorded. Now it's a great way to do a screen reader demo, isn't it? And a good way to get multiple USB sources onto your recording. It's really cool. One thing I will just emphasize is that while you don't need a fancy schmancy audio interface like the Focusrite 8i6, any device that you play with here with this feature does need to be a USB device. What I'm getting at here is that if you have a laptop or a desktop and it has one of those Realtek built-in audio devices, that's not going to come up as a USB peripheral. I paused the recording and set my sources back to 1 just to save any further confusion for the rest of this recording. Now, to make sure we're all keeping up, we have been navigating through this menu at the top. So far we've looked at
record button,
record,
clips button, audio button,
and audio,
profile button.
Now we go into the profile. I won't spend any time in there because this really relates to accounting. You can sign up for a Cleanfeed Pro subscription. If you are doing this for non-commercial purposes, it comes in at $22 a month. That is money well spent, in my view. As you can see, the two marks who developed this are serious audio nerds and giving you one heck of an experience. So we continue down.
Jonathan Mosen.
Now we are on the main screen. So that's that kind of menu bar. Think of it as a Windows menu bar at the top or a Mac menu bar at the top. Now we have the list of guests. Currently there is only me. So we have my name here, and as we know, I can mute every speaker by pushing space on their name.
Ready.
But I'm ready.
Settings button.
It would be great if this could be called input settings. Because this is a local source, you can set the input that this particular individual is using. And we now know, of course, you can have multiple local USB sources. But it is just called settings, and you get used to it. And if you press the settings button a second time, it actually hides these combo boxes. So it's a way of tidying up the screen. So just be mindful of that. I'll down arrow.
Combo box analog 3+ for Focusrite USB audio.
And this tells me the device that I am using. I'll down arrow again.
Combo box both.
This combo box determines what's going to be sent out to other people in the Cleanfeed session, and for that matter, what's being recorded. So we have both. We have
left only, right only, mono mix.
Mono mix, which is what I'm actually going to leave it on for the purposes that I'm using Cleanfeed for right now.
No headphones. Full repair.
No headphones and full repair take us into those areas where you are listening to someone and you think, oh my goodness, they have got some bad echo here. Perhaps they're just using a laptop with built-in speakers. There's a bit of echo coming through. And you just need to get the interview done. They're the kind of guest where you're just not going to get them to a better audio. So Cleanfeed can kick in with some algorithms here. It does make it sound like a more traditional conferencing system, but it's either that or get lots of echo, right? So you can choose no headphones or then go on to full repair, which does even more like noise reduction. Ideally, you want to get your guests into a position where those algorithms aren't required.
No mono mix.
So I'm staying with mono mix for now.
Virtual.
And now I'll down arrow.
Combo box 0.
This is a volume control, so if a particular guest is a little faint, you can increase their volume or decrease it for that matter. It's similar to the combo box that we saw when we were taking a look at the clips.
Headphones.
Below headphones,
Settings button.
we have a settings button. Now this determines what you will hear Cleanfeed through. This is really cool that you can do this right from the browser application and not have to fool with the Windows settings. And it does remember these settings. So if you are using a complex setup where you might have a mixer and you require Cleanfeed to come through a particular channel, maybe you have it in pre-fade or a mix minus configuration, you can do this. I'll press the spacebar on this settings button, the one below the word headphones. That's the key thing.
Settings button.
And now if I down arrow,
Combo box speakers Focusrite USB audio.
that's exactly where I need it to be, but I can also change that to any other audio option on my device. And these can be non-USB audio options, so we're getting into the Windows subsystem here. Anything that appears as an audio playback option in Windows is fine here.
Virtual separator. Connect graphic.
So we've had a pretty good tour of Cleanfeed, but the big question is, how do you get remote guests in? And here's a graphic. It's not a button, and it's simply called Connect. And remember, because it is a graphic, in JAWS you can press G to navigate to it. If I press this,
Name edit.
we're popped right into an edit field where you can type the name of the person that you are inviting to your Cleanfeed session. The number of options available to you on the screen will be significantly more limited if you're using the free version, but you certainly can cause Cleanfeed to send an email out to your guests inviting them to the Cleanfeed session. Now, the Pro version has a few more options, and I haven't been able to find which ones are available free and which ones are in Pro. So I'll show you what I have. If you don't have some of the options that I do, then you can assume they are Pro only. I'm going to type Neil Ewers into the name field, somebody who's very famous in blind audio circles. I'll press the Tab key.
Email address edit.
I can enter his email address here, and this is certainly available to everybody. And if I do this and then I just press invite, then it will send him a pass to the Cleanfeed session. It's important to emphasize that somebody you invite as a guest does not require an account. This makes Cleanfeed a very easy way for people to join. All they have to do is choose a link and press connect. As long as they have a Chromium-based browser or Safari on their iPhone or Firefox on their computer, they will get a connect button. If they're coming into Cleanfeed for the first time, the browser will ask for permission to use the microphone, and that is all there is to it. I'm going to press the Tab key.
Cleanfeed. Advanced checkbox not checked.
I'm going to check the Advanced button, and I suspect that this could be what Pro users can get in addition to what the free users can get. So I've pressed the spacebar.
App bar toolbar. Cleanfeed. Virtual.
Now let's have a look at the screen.
Name edit. Neil limit to the next. Combo box 24 hours.
Now you can determine how long this URL lasts. And the options we have at the moment,
Combo
we will go to the top.
30 minutes. 1 hour. 2 hours. 8 hours. 24 hours. 3 days. 1 week. 1 month. Unlimited.
And that's the end of the list. Essentially, if somebody tries to activate the link after this duration has expired, the link is invalid.
30 minutes. 1 hour. 2 hours. 8 hours. 24 hours.
I will now press Tab.
Combo box. Connect on yours. Ask to accept connection.
That pronunciation is a little bit weird from Oliver there, but what it's actually saying is connect on use, and then the second option,
Ask to accept connection.
if you choose connect on use, then somebody can just drop into the session and they're just there. There's no sound or anything like that, and I understand why. This is not an audio conferencing system, and if you're having a guest drop in to be on a radio show or something like this, the last thing you want is some sort of obnoxious doorbell sound or something interrupting. It doesn't sound very professional. So if you want to safeguard your recording, you can go to
Ask to accept connection.
and then you will have to accept the notification that tells you that somebody has joined. I have not used this, so I don't know how accessible that is. It would be great if it popped up some sort of dialogue that you had to deal with rather than just appearing somewhere.
Connect on yours.
I'll set it back to connect on use.
Combo box. Send by email.
Now with the Pro plan, you can send it by email in the traditional way, or
I'll share the link myself.
I'll share the link myself. One thing I like about doing this is that you can send it in a calendar invitation, which I just find is a bit more professional to be able to put that URL there, send the date and time. I have a kind of a boilerplate message thing that I include in that kind of calendar invitation that tells people what I'm hoping for. Please don't use earbuds, come in a quiet place, make sure you're wearing headphones of some kind, all those kinds of things I put in that calendar invitation, and it includes the Cleanfeed URL. The reason why I demoed inviting Neil Ewers to this is that he now joins us via Cleanfeed. I thought it would be useful to conclude this demonstration of Cleanfeed with a way for you to hear exactly how good it sounds. So hello, Neil.
Should I start with jokes, or should we just chat?
Well, why don't we just geek out, and you can tell me what you're coming in from, because you're sounding great on this Cleanfeed.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm coming in from the Rodecaster Pro, which you just did a show on.
Yes. And your microphone?
It is the Electro Voice RE27.
What is it that you like about Cleanfeed? Because I know that I sort of introduced you to it, I think, and you've been a real adopter of it.
For the last several months, I have been up to my neck in recording Audible books online. Not me recording, but I record the narrator, and the publisher and the author is there. And of course, we've done it online during COVID, but this is a wonderful platform to do that because, for one thing, it is a certain dollar amount a month. I can record for 1 hour, 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, and there's no extra charge. Plus, it's accessible. It was not always, but they have done a really good job of correcting that. And I have talked with them occasionally via email, and every time I ask for something, they either have a good reason why it's not there, but even when they have a good reason why it's not there, they'll look and say, well, let's see if we can make this better. So it's really a work in progress, and the progress has gotten them to a lot of nice places in terms of accessibility. And I use it for other things too. I have done narrations for people. It's just a very clean recording. It is not recorded locally, obviously, but I think I have had one time in the, how many years? A couple of years at least I've been using this. And I average probably 35, 40 hours a month on this thing in the last 6 months. I've had one recording over that period of time that didn't work, and I kind of think that was operator error. So I can't blame them for my operator error, and the fact that you can record multi-track. And I'm not sure what their limitation is, how many people you can have and do multi-track recording. I've never had more than 5. But the fact that you can bring everybody in on different channels, and you can open Reaper or whatever you're using and futz with the volume and get them all sounding right, it's just a great product to use.
Well, one of the things I also like about Cleanfeed is the documentation, how friendly and well written it is. So in consulting this, I see that there is a 32-track limit in terms of the multi-track recording feature. Those are mono tracks. If you go stereo, there's a 16-track limit. And in terms of the number of people, there's no limit. But eventually, of course, if you're in crazy with it, you would exceed your bandwidth. Do you think anybody can or could discern a difference between what we're doing now? So I'm on Cleanfeed and so are you. I'm actually bringing this into the recording with both of us from Cleanfeed. The audio you're hearing from me is not recorded locally either. Is there a difference that anybody can discern, do you think, between the locally recorded audio and this?
I cannot. If it is on high-quality mono or high-quality audio, there are three choices. There's lower quality mono, there's higher quality mono, and there's stereo. I think I can tell a little bit of difference in high-quality audio mono, not in stereo. I don't necessarily record in stereo, but I think the quality is better. And I'm not even sure I can tell a difference in high-quality mono. I haven't done a blind test so far. haven't had somebody give me the files without my knowing what they are, and that's not a good scientific method. If there is any difference, it is hardly discernible.
How would you describe the differences between using this and, say, Zoom? Sometimes I get some resistance when I talk up Cleanfeed, and people say, why don't you just use Zoom? Everybody's got it these days. It's easier.
Dropouts. We tried recording a couple books on Zoom, and because of the popularity of Zoom and COVID, every 30 seconds I would hear this half second of no sound. And I have gotten this maybe 3 times in like 20 hours or so. I mean, of course, it depends on somebody's computer and their wiring. We actually tried to record a woman who had some really problems with her ISP, and it was dropping out. That was in Zoom. And when she got a better ISP, it was better, but it wasn't perfect. I don't get any dropouts, and that's one of the reasons I don't use Zoom. Of course, on Zoom you can have cameras and people kind of like seeing each other, and that is something that Zoom has. But I just didn't like the quality. Also, I find, and I haven't done an exhaustive study of this, but I find that the incoming signal I get from people is better here. Also on Zoom, I'm not sure that I'm hearing what I'm going to hear when I save the file. So, and their recording quality is not as good as this.
It's way low bitrate M4A, isn't it? I mean, what they're supplying for the call recordings, if you choose to record in their solution, is incredibly inferior.
Which is one of the reasons I use this is A, it is better, and B, even if I use Zoom, I could record on my Rodecaster Pro, which I'm doing now. But now I have 2 recordings, the Cleanfeed recording and the Rodecaster Pro recording. So I'm double backed up. I can't do that with Zoom because I don't like the record quality. Right. I have to record on my equipment, and that'll work, but if I don't press the right button, then I don't have another plan to go to.
And it's not clean. I think Cleanfeed is such a good name for the solution. There's audio processing going on in Zoom, and obviously people like you and me, we want to apply our own processing.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to figure out how to turn some of that stuff off in Zoom. And I don't mean to badmouth Zoom. I mean, obviously it's a platform that a lot of people use. But I just really like the quality of this. And I like the fact that it's, and again, I'm not dissing Zoom, but I just like the fact that I am in touch with people who I think are really interested in accessibility. As I said, every time I talk to them, they have a plan. And it's a clean site, and I can access it very easily. It's just got a lot of things going for it.
This is a nice way to close, actually, because it's the way I came in by saying it's about choosing the right tool. So I am very happy to use Zoom for meetings with my team or very large webinars, which we also have in my day job. But when it comes to producing good quality audio for audio-specific tasks, this is a better tool.
Yes, and you've hit on one of the differences, because using a tool that has the need for using 10 or 15 or 20 or 200 people, Zoom is a good platform. But in terms of quality, I think this is much better.
I have tried many other services because I like the medium of podcasting for the sake of the communication and what we can do together. But let's face it, I'm also an audio geek and I love playing with this stuff. I keep coming back to this. Cleanfeed is dependable. It works. The developers are super responsive. They can't grant all your wishes, but they do have dialogue with you and take your points of view on board. As you can hear, there's not actually anything here that's inaccessible. I would say there are a few things that could be made easier, perhaps with some controls showing up as buttons where they currently don't, and you just have to guess that they are actionable. Perhaps certain areas of the screen being automatically spoken through the judicious use, I have to say, of live regions, because many developers overdo it, and perhaps a few more headings. But it's navigable, it's doable, and when you use this often enough, like most things, it becomes second nature. I cannot recommend Cleanfeed highly enough if you want to take podcasting to the next level. And let's not forget that this is great for internet radio solutions as well, for various local recording options, as we've just discussed. You can take a portable laptop and a couple of USB peripherals and bring in remote guests. You've really got your own sort of Zoom PodTrack P4 right there, as long as you have an internet connection. And some laptops do have pretty robust 4 and 5G connections. You can find out more about Cleanfeed and give it a try for yourself by visiting cleanfeed.net. That's CLEANFEED.net. And if you want to discuss this, we do discuss Cleanfeed quite a bit in the Blind Podmaker email group. If you would like to subscribe, even if you're not creating a podcast but you are into this sort of audio, recording spoken word stuff, then you're welcome. Send a blank email to creators-subscribe@theblindpodmaker.com. That's creators-subscribe@theblindpodmaker.com. Thanks for listening. Look at this. We are into hour number 3 of Mosen at Large in just a moment, at which time Bonnie Mosen is here with the Bonnie Bulletin. We've got your views on a whole range of issues, including the whole disability pride thing. Is it possible to be proud of one impairment but not of another? And somebody reflects on the importance of Braille to them. Plenty more to come over the next hour. Hope you'll stay with us.
Mushroom FM.
Starting out small and expanding to cover the world.
Mushroom FM. Jonathan Mosen.
Oh, that's me.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
And if you would like to be in touch with the show, well, that's what Tigger's like best. So you can drop us an email, Jonathan, that's JONATHAN at mushroomfm.com. Now, that email could just be written down, hopefully spell-checked at least, and incomplete sentences helps me so much. You can also attach an audio clip to that email if you prefer, in MP3, M4A, or you can maybe attach a Dropbox link to a file format that's bigger than that. The listener line is also available to you. 864-60-MOSEN is that number, 864-606-6736. If you're on Twitter, you are welcome to use the Mushroom FM hashtag. Just write the number sign and Mushroom FM anywhere in your tweet. It will get to us here. And if you are tuned in via YouTube or Facebook, you are welcome to leave a comment in the little box there, and we'll see it there too. That amazingly soothing music ushers in another crosstalk free, we hope, Bonnie Bulletin. Here's Bonnie Mosen.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, mate, I am super well. It's been a week of adventure, of resolution, of weirdness.
Yeah.
Happy 4th, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it is the 4th here, so happy pre-4th of July to those in the U.S. and expat Americans like me around the world, because I've been seeing on Facebook where the fireworks have already begun in a lot of neighborhoods, which I really wish they wouldn't set off just random fireworks. They do that here, too, on Guy Fawkes Day, or before Guy Fawkes Day a lot of times, and Matariki, but which is the Mari New Year, but and probably the Chinese New Year as well. But really, if you're going to do fireworks, go to the professionals. Go to the local ball field. Go stand along the river. Don't scare all the dogs and people in your neighborhood.
You're very bossy today.
I know. Well, first of all, they're dangerous, so you need to leave them in the hands of the professionals. And second, it scares all the animals.
I often feel this way about mixers.
Victor?
Like the big one that I'm in front of now.
Yeah.
They are very dangerous, and they should probably be left in the hands of professionals.
Yeah.
But they let me have one anyway. Now, I think that eventually what will happen is that the whole Guy Fawkes tradition will just die a death in this country. We inherited this from Britain. For those who aren't familiar, this is all about the gunpowder plot. I think it happened in 1603 or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
A long time ago, where Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament. Parliament, you are exploded.
Yes.
And I don't know.
Terrorism goes back a long way.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether we celebrate that he didn't succeed or we celebrate because he tried. I really don't.
I'm not sure. And then he ended up a horrible death, though.
Yes, he was hung, drawn, and hanged, drawn, and quartered. Yeah, nasty. Anyway, so on the 5th of November, we have these occasions, and the fireworks that you can get on sale now are just a tiny shadow of their former selves. When I was a kid, the local Lions Club used to come to the School for the Blind, and they would have these amazing fireworks exhibitions by a big bonfire. That's the other really weird thing, too. When they have it in the UK, the bonfire works because it's getting a bit chilly and it's a November evening. But the bonfires don't really work here because it's warming up. It's summer. It's heading into summer. Very strange. So I suspect that if we do have fireworks, they will be professionally run and they will be part of Matariki, which is the Māori New Year, as you say. And it's now going to be an official public holiday.
On June 24th.
Because Jacinda gave it to us. Well, it's going to vary every year.
See, that's not what I was told the other day at work.
No, well, whoever told you that is incorrect.
Okay.
They've just published a calendar for the next 30 years of Matariki, and the holiday will fall on a different day each year based on the closest Friday to when Matariki happens.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So you might like to pass that on to your work, particularly if they're in HR, or they'll give you the wrong day off.
No, one HR. So.
That's very good. Well, we've got so much to talk about. Shall we talk about the great washing machine saga, which I know people are on absolute tenterhooks to hear about every single week? I mean, I'm sure they are.
Yeah. Well, the app is working again, mysteriously. Henry and Heidi came over to, I think, work on something else and reset the router. Is that what happened? Or
see, the art is in the telling of the story, isn't it? The art is in the telling of the story. You make it sound so boring. Yeah. So let me have a go. So what happened was we have been having a series of quite interesting issues with various appliances. It's getting winter time here. Well, it is. We're right in the thick of winter time. The temperatures are getting quite cool in the mornings. And suddenly our Wi-Fi system here, which is really reliable because it's based on Unify equipment, which is some of the best internet gear you can buy, it's been dodgy. And suddenly, after years of successful service, the heat pump here in the studio has stopped responding to the automation system, and it does it periodically. So we have a routine that's set up at 4:30 every morning. It heats the house because we get up at 5. So by the time 5 o'clock comes along, it's starting to get toasty and warm, and it's all very effective. Suddenly, the studio heat pump stopped responding to all of this Wi-Fi malarkey. And in the end, while Sarah Hillis was doing Come By the Hills, Mushroom FM's premier Celtic music show, I reset the router. I switched it off and back on again because no one's going to be inconvenienced by this, and the heat pump came back to life. And this was very good. But then it stopped again. So I said to Heidi and Henry, perhaps they might like to come over and have a geeky bonding time with us, because the process for reconfiguring the Mitsubishi heat pump in the studio with the Wi-Fi system is not accessible. It is a really difficult process to do without sight. Impossible, actually. So they came over here, and I said to them at the time, Samsung have just called us finally, and they said, we are going to send a technician to you, and they're going to look at your washing machine to find out what the matter with it is. But, they said, woe betide ye. They didn't exactly say that, but that was the message. Woe betide ye if it turns out to be your fault, because if it is, we are going to charge you for the call out. So I thought, ooh. And then it occurred to me, I wonder what would happen if we swapped out our old router for the current one. Like if we put in the router that we used to use before we went to Ubiquity, would it suddenly work? And it wouldn't be that difficult to do because the Wi-Fi key is the same. And I said to them, maybe we should try this just to rule out anything at our end before they threaten to charge us. So we were thinking about doing this. It took quite a long time for Heidi and Henry, who have working eyeballs, to get the heat pump talking. And then I said, all right, let's just have a look at the troubleshooting steps Samsung have provided. Let's see. And Heidi ran the Smart Things app. And when she ran it, she gave this sort of squeal of delight. And she said, "Dad, it's working, it's working." And for some reason, the washing machine has just sprung back to life. Now, we don't know whether Samsung might have done something remotely because they do have the credentials. They were looking at it remotely. But it's also possible that the two things are related. And my theory, this is the theory that is mine. Do you know that Monty Python one about
Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah. My theory is that what we were dealing with was a conflict of IP addresses, that for some inexplicable reason, the heat pump and the washing machine were assigned the same heat... I'll try that again, because I can edit this in the podcast. My theory is the heat pump and the washing machine were assigned the same IP address internally by the router. That is my theory. And by essentially brute forcing the heat pump back to life, it freed the IP address for the washer. That's the only thing that I can think of that might have fixed this issue. But for whatever reason, and I'm knocking on the wood, that was when? Wednesday?
Was it Wednesday? I think so, maybe.
No, it was the day of the board meeting. When was the board meeting?
Tuesday. Was that Tuesday?
The board meeting was Wednesday.
Oh, was it Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the board meeting was Wednesday, yes. So it was Wednesday, and it hasn't broken since, nor has the heat pump.
Mm-mm.
And so we're very, very, very upbeat about this. So I was able to contact Samsung and say, guess what, guys? We don't need your call-out anymore.
No, which is good. So.
Yeah. So you're gloriously basking in the washing machine's automated.
And again, the washing machine was working. We just
you should
couldn't
keep
use
saying
it.
that every single.
Well, it sounds like it was never. It was dead, but it wasn't. It just wouldn't work through the app.
Yes, just in case you missed that, the last 4 times Bonnie made this point.
Well, we could have new listeners.
What? No, they're getting sick of us. So that's very good. It's been a really resolving kind of week because I have also had a problem and it's been really mysterious and I haven't talked about it because really I didn't know what to say about it. I installed iOS 15 and now the public beta of this is out, by the way. It's a remarkably stable operating system given how early in the cycle we are. It really is really good. Well, one of the things that happened to me though is that I could not run the Find My app. And I said to Spotty nephew Anthony, who's also running it, and a couple of other people, are you able to run your Find My app? And they said yes. So I thought, that's odd. And I waited for Beta 2 to come out, and still I could not run the Find My app. So I thought, I really have to look into this. So I went through the rather arduous process of restoring to a good backup of iOS 14.6. And I always obviously take encrypted backups before installing a beta, because you should do those things. So I was able to bring my phone back to the state that it was in before the iOS 15 upgrade. But you know what? I still couldn't run the Find My app. So then I did a bit of internet research, and I found that on occasion this does happen to people. Nobody seems to know what the fix is, but occasionally you just try to run the Find My app and it says Find My is unavailable. Now, I obviously did all the usual things. I reset network settings. I signed out of iCloud and back in again. I did all those things. I did the hard reset thing. You know, I'm not a nit when it comes to this stuff. Nothing was fixing it. It was clearly an Apple thing. So that was a bit annoying, not only because I couldn't spy on everybody, like where the kids are and where Bonnie is and everything like that, but I couldn't use my AirTags as well, which was a real concern. You know, what happened if I left something somewhere and I didn't know where it was? But then on Friday night at about 11:30, I was playing with the phone, and I just every so often I was running the Find My app to see what would happen, and it just worked, and I couldn't believe it. Everybody was there. My AirTags were there. It was just magically there. And it's been working ever since. So the problem was obviously at Apple's end. They have seen fit to reinstate my Find My. And I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Anything else?
No, I guess not.
Oh. Because it's the Bonnie Bulletin, and I feel like I haven't done... you haven't done too much talking.
No, just listening to about the fixing of the heat pump and the 15. Let's see. What else has gone on this week? No, is it?
I had a potentially fatal injury.
Yeah. So you can tell us about that.
But see, that means another waffle from me. Yeah. But it is an interesting story. It is an interesting story. So I came upstairs after another hard day on Tuesday, and Bonnie was home and Eclipse was home, and that was all very nice. And Eclipse is often very exuberant. That's Bonnie's seeing eye dog. She's often very exuberant when she comes back. And we have this really cool game. What I tend to do is I back into this room, which is just around the corner from the stairs, that we're using as a gym. And I back into it, and then Eclipse runs past, and I leap out and pretend to catch her, but I never actually do, and that's what she likes. She thinks she's escaped me. So then she runs past in the other direction again, and I leap out again and pretend to catch her, and she thinks it's wonderful that I'm trying to catch her, but never does, so she keeps running around, and she loves the game. And I was getting ready to play this game because I could tell that that's what she wanted. And I was having a chat to Bonnie, and you know how work is. She was having a little whinge, and I was having a little whinge about things going on. And then I thought I'll play with Eclipse, so I backed into what I thought was the gym room, but actually I backed myself down the flight of stairs, which I started hurtling down at great speed. But what's interesting about that when you have an incident like this is that your brain really goes into slow-mo. So I remember really clearly, and it must have been like just a very fractions of a second, all these thoughts going through my head like, if I don't take some sort of remedial corrective action, I could break my back, I could have brain damage. There are a number of exciting things that could be in my immediate future. And then I thought, so I had better try and stop it. I reached out to the balustrade, which is kind of a slatty thing on one side of the stairs, and I just managed to hook into it, but only with my little finger. And what that meant was that my whole weight of me hurtling down the stairs was all on that little finger. I tell you what, it was so painful that I even said holy soup, and I apologize for my bad language, but wow, I mean, that was just really bad. So I couldn't get to a doctor because the winter weather had set in. We were under all sorts of flood warnings.
We were still in level 2, I think.
We were in level 2 of the Rona at that point, and so it wasn't possible for me to get to the after hours clinic easily.
Plus,
so I just
who knows what time they closed.
Yes, suck it up is what I had to do. And it was really painful. And eventually I got to a doctor the day after the board meeting, you see. I was just sitting there enduring the pain during the board meeting, and finally managed to get in there. But, oh my goodness, it was just absolutely hideous. And apparently it's not broken. It might be sprained, but it probably isn't that either. So I'm in the system now. But those things are terrible. And
it does hurt.
And you have those little sinking feelings where you think, if you go to the doctor and you explain this, are they going to question your blindness competency, even though it could happen to anyone? You know, sighted people don't have eyes in the back of their head either. So if they're stupid enough to perambulate backwards, it could have happened to them as well.
Oh, yeah. People fall all the time in the yard, the garden, whatever. And I've fallen down those stairs before, head first, or at least tripped down them, not actually fallen, but
halfway down the stairs.
Yeah.
The stairs.
And then, of course, poor Mark.
Yeah, Mike, he fell down the stairs when he was here. Yeah, we need one of those baby gates or something.
Yeah. Then I don't know what Eclipse would think.
Yes, she does. She likes being able to hurtle down the stairs to visit me down here in the studio. She likes that. So that's anyway. So it's been an adventurous week, but everything's kind of, our technology's behaving. It's all very encouraging. I also did get Brian Hartgen's scripts for Microsoft Teams, and I highly recommend them. I spend an inordinate amount of time in Microsoft Teams. And it's a great platform, actually. It's sort of idiosyncratic, but it's accessible. It's a great way to collaborate with people. And Brian has done an outstanding job with the scripts for Microsoft Teams. So if you use Teams, I highly recommend them. And I even got his tutorial on Microsoft Teams, because there are always things that when you go into the depth of producing a good quality tutorial, you learn a lot as the producer. And so I knew there'd be some little nuggets that Brian would have picked up. So it was worthwhile as well. Right. Now, I should be quiet and hand over to you for any further.
I think we're done now.
What? What? So, well, that's a bit anticlimactic.
Can't really think of it. It's been great hearing people's radio memories. And
isn't it interesting that it turns out that the Sparky kid is the same Sparky that's in the stories, the talking train and the magic piano. So I wondered if there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, people talking about disability pride and that sort of thing.
We're going to be talking more about that in just a moment.
Yeah. And I don't really think of it as I'm proud I'm blind. It's not something that I've ever really thought about. It's just what I am. So, I'm not ashamed of it, but I don't really think about it being proud. I'm just what I am. It might be different. It would be interesting to see if it's different for people who are born blind, as opposed to losing sight later, like me. So, but I don't know. I've never really thought about it. And it's interesting to think about other disabilities and, how people, perceive those. And it was interesting hearing Christy earlier talk about the wheelchair. That was interesting about how she felt it was, safer for her to travel in the wheelchair, and she felt that, refusing it might be degrading to people in wheelchairs. And I think that really, and people are entitled to their opinions and what works best for them, and that's fine. I don't take wheelchairs because I'm usually with my dog, and the dog is not going to run along beside it. Or I do know people who've had to have their dog sit in their lap because it was one of those things where language was a barrier. They had to get to their plane. They didn't have time to argue with the person. But I think there really needs to be more of a concerted effort to really train people that not all disability accessibility is the same. I think to the whole thing with the disability, the disabled rooms in hotels. I was having a conversation with a coworker who's deaf, and she hates being put in the disability room.
I do too, and it's not because I'm looking down on people who need them. It's just I actually like a really nice big tub. That's what if I find a hotel room.
That was her. She says I don't need a disabled. It's my hearing, I want a bathtub, and they claimed that was the only room left, but she said that wasn't true because half the hotel was empty. But it really, and they had this humongous shower, and when I check in, I'm like, no, I do not want the disabled room.
Yeah,
do not put me there.
It's kind of reassuring to know that it happens to deaf people as well as blind people because you're blind, you must need the disability room, and I don't want it. I want my nice. So give me one of those big spa bath things with the bubble machine. That makes me very happy. I love the bubble machine, and of course it's convention season coming up in the United States.
Yep. Virtual.
Yes, virtual again. So NFB goes first, don't they? Is the ACB the week after or something?
Yeah, NFB's next week.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I need to look at both. I haven't registered because the time difference can be interesting, but I need to look I know I'm going to the journalism group. I think that's the 6th. So that'll be an early morning for me.
Kind of cool to be able to tune in. And I think a lot of blind people who don't have the wherewithal or maybe the confidence to travel really enjoy feeling connected in this way.
Yeah, or the money, because it is expensive.
Yes, that's what I mean by wherewithal.
The wherewithal.
I wonder what will happen presumably next year when things can go back to a physical location, whether there will be some sort of hybrid.
There could be. It's highly possible.
Yeah.
I know next year ACB's in Omaha and NFB's in New Orleans, I believe.
There are good steaks in Nebraska, aren't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we should go.
Yeah, I think I would, no offense to NFB or ACB, but I think I'd rather go to Omaha than New Orleans in July.
Oh, but I went to the New Orleans convention in 1997 that the NFB had. It was magical.
Was that in New Orleans?
Yes.
Oh, it's just so hot.
It was just so cool. And you'd go around that Bourbon Street area.
It was hot.
You'd go around the French Quarter and you'd hear these bands playing, and they were so talented. I'll never forget the it was like a mum and dad and kids playing, and they were so good playing this jazz. And they took a little break, and there was a crowd of people just listening to these guys. And the dad said, "This here is the tip jar, and over there is the ATM machine."
That's cute.
It was a great convention. And of course, that's where Kenneth Jernigan did his speech about the day after civil rights, which turned out to be his last banquet speech.
Now, is that what year was that?
97.
Okay, so that wasn't the famous convention of the guide dogs, was that? Because I thought that was in New Orleans, too.
I don't think that... Was there a famous convention of guide dogs?
Well, there was that article, but I thought it was things that came out from...
Oh, well,
that happened
the whole October 1995 Braille Monitor was devoted to the subject of guide
and
dogs.
I think it was a lot of stuff that happened at that convention.
Well, but it couldn't have been because the convention was 97 in New Orleans.
I know, but I think they've been in New Orleans a few times.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I think they were there in 95, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so it's exciting, and it is cool because people from all over the world can tune into the conventions, and that's one thing that's been a good thing about the pandemic is a lot of virtual trainings that many of the agencies have done, and the consumer organizations, that people are able to just join in from all over the world, and and they learn. I attended some from Virginia, and Dominique, I think, still listening. So
she's gone now.
Oh, she's gone now.
She's gone when you came on.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking to her about that this week. So, but anyway, so a lot of states did virtual trainings to serve their customers, and that it helped serve a lot of people. So that was really.
I think Dominique was listening for the Cleanfeed stuff.
Oh,
I think
okay,
that's what
cool.
she was listening for.
Cool.
Well, I'm glad we got some Bonnie in the Bonnie
Yeah.
Bulletin because I was feeling bad about it. Yeah. All right. So have a lovely week, and hopefully our technology will work. The washer will wash. We will have no more falls.
I did start my new job this week.
And there'll be no more crosstalk. What did you say?
I did start my new job this week.
Was it only this week that you started it? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's been a big week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't any different than because it's my same desk, same office and stuff. But I did start last Monday. So
Same desk, same office, new responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
So, yeah,
tremendous.
That was good. So starting to meet with people and things like that.
Good on you. Well, thank you for another exquisite Bonnie Bulletin. And there are some Americans who celebrate the 4th of July here. They have functions. Don't they have something at the American Embassy?
Yeah, I think it's by invitation only.
What? Oh, we'll get one for you.
Because I know people that go, which I'm not quite sure Kiwis, and I'm not quite. They may do other things. I think some of the bars and stuff do.
Yes, they do for sure. Did President Biden announce an ambassador to New Zealand yet? I'm not sure if he has. Oh, there you go. All right, maybe you could be. You're here anyway. You're a very diplomatic person.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to have an experience to be an ambassador.
Okay.
I mean,
No.
Some people, it's like, okay, I'm not sure what they. I mean, some are obviously long-time diplomatic corps employees, but then others are just people who have been very kind to whoever's been in office and given them some moolah and stuff.
Cushy postings.
Exactly.
Yes.
Particularly, I mean, I would hope for the really high conflict areas they would, but England especially is one that get a lot of cushy postings to the court of St. James.
Well, now, as a Tennessean who you know well might say, it's time for you to go. Al Gore said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He eventually said it was time for him to go after the 2000 result. Yeah. All right. Have a lovely week. And you can hear Bonnie on the Studio 70 show on Mushroom FM every weekday at 11 a.m. and p.m. Eastern Time. You can check the Mushroom FM schedule to find out when that is in your time zone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Podcast.
Marissa has sent in this little article, which is called Braille. What is it? Why is Braille so important anyway? First and foremost, Braille allows you to be able to read and write. Braille gives your eyes a break if they become tired easily. Plus, you can read in the dark. Reading and writing are fundamental skills that contribute to a successful and independent adult life. Braille is not something mysterious, nor is it a secret language. You can't possibly expect to gain the concept in one day. Braille is a system composed of dots that allow you to write the alphabet, words, complete sentences, numbers, punctuation, and contractions. I will profess, as someone who has been legally blind since birth, who has read large print all her life, I was not taught Braille in school. I am by no means blaming anyone, as that was a long time ago, nor is it appropriate to do so in this situation. Instead, educating those who might be in similar situations, or have always wanted to learn more about Braille. I feel that it is something that should be taught to children, regardless of their visual impairment. If a child were to lose their vision later on in life, then they have another way to read, write, and gain information about their surroundings. In addition, Braille allows you to become more proficient at spelling. By using Braille, you can also learn how text is formatted, including where and how to place titles, subtitles, chapter headings, and other organizational features. I wanted to learn it as an adult. For me, Braille is another tool to have when assistive technology fails. If the computer breaks, or the cost of said assistive technology becomes unaffordable, at least I have some knowledge of Braille to fall back on. Or, if I cannot find a material in large print. Large print is not always readily available, which can be frustrating in and of itself. I remember that large printed material was often heavy to carry. I know that Braille books may have many volumes versus regular print. Moreover, it is not always convenient to listen to speech synthesizers. When attempting to write down important information, Braille can be useful in a variety of situations, from labeling commonly used items to finding your floor when in an elevator, jotting down a note or phone number, or if you're up for it, reading a recipe. Am I a fast reader? Certainly not, as I am used to reading with my eyes. Will I be as proficient as someone who has been blind from birth? Nope, but that will come in due time. I am pleased that I know Grade 1, letters, numbers, and punctuation. I know a bit of Grade 2, contracted Braille. I will continue to do my best with improving my abilities when it comes to learning and practicing Braille. I want to conclude this post by saying if it were not for Louis Braille, the gentleman who invented it, we would not have Braille today. Thank you very much, Marissa. And it really saddens me when I hear people who should have been given access to Braille as children and were not. And I do fear that sometimes these decisions are still being made because resources are so scarce. We've benefited so much in so many ways from mainstreaming, but one of the areas that we haven't really come to terms with is that mainstreaming of blind children takes a lot of resourcing to do it right, because you are generally, as a blind child, in front of a mainstream teacher who, in blindness terms, is illiterate. How many other groups in society would tolerate being in front of a classroom teacher who was illiterate? Literacy skills are fundamental to teaching. And yet so often our blind kids are faced with exactly this issue, and we get teachers who do a great job and are often just run off their feet going from school to school to school, because mainstreaming blind children is a lot more complex than, say, making one-off physical modifications to a building. It really requires significant, intensive, expensive, ongoing resourcing.
Mosen at Large Podcast.
Here's another email from Andrew Walker, who writes, "Hello, Jonathan. I just wanted to add a little to your response to Greg's message regarding blind pride. While I accept that people will have many different views and that these may not align with my own, I consider calling into question the honesty of another person because we don't agree with them unpalatable. I am a fervent adherent to the podcast and consider that one of the main strengths of it is that many views can be expressed, including those that contradict your own position. I can confirm that I went blind in adulthood, as you mentioned. I was 40 years old and had a lifetime of seeing experience. Nonetheless, it was not until I went blind that I came to the shocking realization of just how disempowering sight loss, or however you wish to describe it, can be. What struck me was the degree to which sighted people tried to prevent me from doing things or wanted to do them for me, simply because I didn't do them in a sighted sort of way. I remember in those early days having a lift from a friend and, on arriving at the destination, reaching out to find the door handle. Experience told me the likely positions of a door handle, but seeing that I had reached for the wrong option first, my friend slapped my hands out of the way so that she could open the door. In my view, such things happen with blind people much of the time. As I have stated previously, sighted people, as a generality, are not receptive to people doing things in any other than a sighted way. This was the biggest hurdle I faced in becoming blind. I didn't have huge feelings of loss, as many people give account. I didn't spend days, weeks, or months lamenting my fate or losing sleep because I couldn't see the faces of my children. I'm not diminishing the experiences of those who have encountered such anguish. I did feel that I was being pressured, sometimes wittingly, sometimes innocently, into a mode of dependence on sighted people simply because I couldn't do things in a sighted way anymore. Now this was such a wake-up, since I had worked in care and education all my working life, working with people with disabilities of various kinds. I realized that, in spite of working in that field for many years, I had no idea about the lived experience of people with disabilities and the way so many are held in a state of dependence and are constantly being undermined by being told explicitly or implicitly that they are not doing something in the right way. I call this sight-centrism, because in the main, sighted people are so caught up in their own sightedness that they are unable to see that there are other ways of doing things, equally valid, but not the way of the perceived wisdom of the sighted populace. Greg may or may not be right in asserting that sight is the most developed sense, but I could make an argument for saying that hearing and the development of language is up there. As for Greg's assertion that sight isn't about data, I'm afraid the evidence is to the contrary. As I've said before, with evidence from such sources as the invisible gorilla, the matter of selective attention is important in visual perception. I can agree that it is not just about data, but I don't recall anyone suggesting that it was. It may sound like I'm sightist in some way, but I'm not at all. I can certainly understand why some find it hard to find the social model of disability a valid way of interpreting the world. After all, it took me so much time, and only after experiencing blindness myself, before appreciating what it means. In fairness to Greg, the concept of the social model can seem a bit screwy, but it is nonetheless a valid position. Here in the UK, it underpins social policy, albeit with a range of problems associated with it. There are so few blind people, or at least that's the way it seems to me, who are fully engaged in society. So many seem to be lonely, isolated, and economically disadvantaged. I can only assume that they don't live that way by choice. I keep saying that the sighted person of today is the blind person in waiting. Unfortunately, just because someone goes blind, they do not necessarily cease to be sight-centric. Thus, blindness is experienced as a terrible loss, and even the blind person expects that they should do things in a sighted way, and feels inadequate because they cannot. Incidentally, although I have been blind now for over 20 years, I still imagine the world visually. I have to have a face to associate with a person. Some people who I've known for about 20 years, I'm not sure whether I have a memory of them from when I could see, or whether I've invented a face for them since I went blind. I don't know if this is a common thing. I'm not judging those who live in a state of dependence as long as it is a choice and not the default position of disempowerment born out of living in a sighted world without sight. I also don't intend to offend those who might find my views on blindness strange. I know that going blind has been a fantastic journey for me, not without problems, of course, but pretty good. I also know that there are those who find this view abhorrent and are possibly angry at the way I portray blindness. I certainly don't intend to trivialize the nature of the challenges those people experience. I do believe, however, that the social model of disability is a progressive one, and one which provides a vehicle for overcoming the problems generated by society in changing attitudes as well as the built environment. Unfortunately, however, I think that it will be at least another 50 years before it replaces the medical deficit model, and maybe it never will. Well, thank you, Andrew. I like to hope we're making a bit more progress than it taking 50 years in New Zealand, but we have the fortune of being a smaller country. But you've brought up an interesting issue for me, and that is the mindset, how we handle adversity generally. And I mean, let's not trivialize the fact that if you have a sense that provides you with a lot of information and suddenly you don't have it anymore, that's a massive adjustment. How you adjust to it has a lot to do with, I think, the way that you view the world and the way that you might view crises. To give you an example of this, I once met somebody many years ago now who was a nun. She had devoted her life to her faith, and she was in her 90s. And she went to sleep one night fully sighted and woke up the next morning fully blind. She was able to read the newspaper the day before, and there was some medical issue that resulted in her losing her sight overnight. And for the first time in her life, she started questioning her faith, started wondering, is there really a God when something like this could happen to her so late in her life and deprive her of all of these things that were dear to her, things like knitting and reading the newspaper and books and of course her Bible. And even though we were able to tell her, well, you can relearn those things and there are versions of the Bible available in audio and all of that sort of thing, for her it was just the last straw. It was just one setback too many. And then you meet other people who take such a setback completely differently and see it as a challenge and, it's a pain in the butt, but it's going to be okay. And in my view, we shouldn't judge people for that. We need to meet people where they are. We can counsel, we can provide good quality examples of how you can lead a fulfilling life as a blind person, but we have to accept that people respond to adversity in different ways, and I think that's what your email is conveying. When this whole subject came up, and I did my little editorial piece here on the show about why I personally am proud to be blind, I never said for a moment that everybody should feel the same way as me, and that if you are not proud to be blind, somehow there's something wrong with you, or you haven't adjusted to blindness properly, or something like that. It's just genuinely the way I feel. And I was heartened to read an article in USA Today recently, where the purpose of it really was to decry the use of the term special needs. And the people in this article in USA Today were talking about owning the term disabled. They're proud of it. And they did have a bit of a discussion about person first versus identity first language. I personally will never use person first language. I think it's convoluted. It sends all the wrong signals. And so there was some discussion. But what really struck me about this article was the disability pride that was coming through. And it really gladdens my heart to see this disability pride movement growing in momentum. We're owning it. We're proud of it. We are demanding, as citizens, that society fix the disabling barriers that hold us back. It's like you say, and you clearly have got a really good handle on the social model of disability. Just because we don't do things in a sighted way all the time, it doesn't make them lesser options. It makes them alternative options that are equally valid. I really appreciate getting your email. Thank you for writing it. Now, here is an interesting one from someone who wants to remain anonymous. Hi, Jonathan. I have been listening to your informative podcast for a long time. Well, thank you. I was especially interested in your thoughts on pride and blindness, the skills you have developed, your intellectual curiosity, and the people you have met. But how do you feel about your hearing impairment? Are you proud of it too, in the same way? As a person with low vision, I often feel stuck in the middle, with not low enough eyesight to have learnt non-visual skills, such as Braille with an uppercase B from childhood, and now having to learn as an adult and being treated very differently by members of the public or my family who think I can see much more than I actually can. Thank you for your email. That is a fair question, and it's a really good question. And in fact, my first wife, Amanda, who was on the podcast recently talking about the concept of blind culture, asked me this very thing. She was sort of applauding and saying, this is fantastic, and the post has apparently gone quite viral in Amanda's circles as well about the blind pride. And she said, but do you feel the same way about your hearing impairment? The short answer is no, I don't. And I think that's why I completely relate to people who either have very gradually deteriorating vision or to people who have gone blind later in life, just not feeling the same way as me or even understanding why I feel the way that I do. I totally get that. My hearing loss has been quite gradual, and so it feels insidious. And like the person who wrote this email, except in a hearing impaired context, I kind of sometimes feel like I don't have limited enough hearing to call myself deaf-blind, although interestingly, the deaf-blind community in New Zealand has been really embracing of me. And I get that because I guess they think, well, here's somebody who's out there doing things and we can call this person deaf-blind. And it's not that I'm ashamed of calling myself deaf-blind. I guess I don't want to feel like an interloper. When I mentioned this to someone and sort of said, am I being a fraud if I call myself deaf-blind? Because then people will say, but you can hear, how can you do a podcast if you're deaf-blind? They have said there's a definition of deaf-blind, and it definitely encompasses you. So I don't mind being described as deaf-blind. So if my hearing aids broke right now, I would be stuck. I couldn't attend any meetings. I couldn't do my job. I might be able to attend online meetings if I had headphones on and cranked them up enough and used some of my audio magic to equalize things in a certain way so that when I cranked up the volume enough, I wasn't getting feedback, all those sorts of things. I might be able to manage that. But I certainly couldn't go out without them. I couldn't cross a street. I'd have difficulty carrying on a conversation with somebody right next to me. So my hearing impairment is quite significant, and thanks to my audio knowledge and persistence and really good audiologists, I've sort of mitigated it reasonably well. But I still have difficulty in crowds, and for a long time I would not disclose, and I regret it now. If you have heard the Glenn Gordon interviews that he did with me, which are available in a podcast called In the Arena, the Jonathan Mosen story. It's available free on mosen.org, and it's also available as a podcast. If you search for In the Arena, you'll find it. I think I made the point there that a lot of people used to think if they met me at a blindness conference or something like that, that I was really aloof. And it wasn't that I was aloof, it's that often I would meet people in a noisy exhibit hall, and I really couldn't hear them. I couldn't hear what they were saying, and so you try and muddle through the conversation, you know. And these days I do a number of things. I do have a device that I take with me now for those crowded environments, and if I know somebody's trying to have a really good conversation with me, I'll hand a little microphone to them, and then we're rocking, because it's just better. But it took me a while. It took me a journey to feel comfortable enough to disclose all of that, which, now that I look back on it, was counterproductive to take that long to do that, because when somebody knows that you have an impairment, they're usually willing to accommodate it, but if you muddle through, they don't know. So my blindness has been a constant, and I've embraced it and I've celebrated it, and I think there is a blind culture, and I feel like I'm a part of it, and I revel in that. I love that. The hearing impairment, because of its insidious deterioration, has been harder. And I even was at a point in my life at one point where I thought, I don't think I could live if I had to have a cochlear implant. And so hearing from all these wonderful listeners over the last few weeks, talking to Jim Snowbarger about his journey, and he's back on the radio now, doing Snow White FM, and all the other people who talked about this, has personally given me so much encouragement and hope that if I ever got to that point, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be a massive adjustment for someone like me, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, and life would go on, and I'd still have Bonnie, and I'd still have my kids, and I'd be okay. But I didn't always feel that way. And I kind of like to hope that if we have people listening who have deteriorating vision, they may gain an understanding of the idea that life with blindness is okay. They might not get the blind pride thing. They might think it's over the top. I accept that some people will. But they will know that life with blindness is okay. Every time I read an email on this show with my Braille display, I'm mindful that that's a pretty cool advertisement for Braille. I couldn't do the podcast in the way that I do it without Braille. So with alternative techniques, life can go on. Now, in the case of the hearing impairment thing, I guess I feel I'm more of a learner as well as possibly a purveyor of useful information. Because my audio background has helped me and I try and pass that information on. I'm just so lucky that I have that knowledge and I've got an audiologist who puts up with me, because I'm probably the worst and the best audiology patient. The worst because I'm really persistent and insistent, but the best because at least I can articulate my needs really well in audiological terms. And that's really lucky for me. But I am also taught by people who are further down this journey than I am. Since I went low carb, my hearing impairment has stuck where it is, so it hasn't deteriorated any further for quite some years. But it all could change tomorrow, and I'm mindful of that. I don't know whether I might one day just wake up and get to the point where it would not be possible for me to do this podcast anymore without some sort of significant retraining and reworking. It could happen. I could just not turn up next week because I can't hear anymore. It's all uncertain. But in terms of the pride thing, I think I'm proud of what I achieved despite it, as opposed to proud to be it. So I'm proud to be blind, but I'm grateful for my hearing impairment. And the reason why I'm grateful for it is that it gives me some empathy with people who are not proud to be blind, who are proud of what they achieve despite their blindness, but who don't feel the sort of inherent sense of belonging to a culture of a shared history, because I don't feel that about my hearing impairment. So I express gratitude for the empathy that it has given me and the ability to have new technical challenges to overcome and new gadgets to try. But no, I can't say I'm proud of my hearing impairment. That is my honest answer to the question, and it's a really good question. So when you, anonymous contributor, talk about the struggle you have with your family about how much they think you can see and that kind of thing, I get it, because you're kind of living in that sighted world in the halfway house. I completely get where you are with that.
Mushroom FM.
Aditya Garg is writing in and says, "Hi, Jonathan. In one of the recent Mosen at Large podcasts, one listener was looking for resources to learn Windows 10 and JAWS. That's right, that was Maribel who was asking about this. I am sharing 2 resources below. 1, Getting Started with Windows 10 by Chris Grabowski and Kim Loftus. This is a neat little book available with NBP. I believe this has to do more with understanding and navigating Windows 10 and less with JAWS, but the interested listener may want to check the table of contents. 2, An Immersion into Windows 10 with JAWS for Windows by Kathy Ann Murtha. Again, I will request anyone interested in getting these resources to go through the table of contents, as both of these resources are paid, and one wants to be sure they are getting exactly what they are looking for. And, of course, Kathy Ann Murtha runs the Access Technology Institute. You can find that at blindtraining.com. So thank you for both of those resources. David Vandermolen writes, "Greetings to you, Jonathan, and to your listeners. Yesterday, an incident happened to me that occurs fairly often when I deal with medical personnel. I was at my dentist's office. We had a discussion about treatment options for two of my teeth. We came to an agreement as to what I would like to have done. The dentist guided me to the waiting room where my wife was. He then proceeds to tell my wife about the discussion we just had and what treatment option I chose, as if I were a small child and he was talking to my mother. Remember, this is in a waiting room where there are often others who could have heard that conversation. In this instance, no one was there, but I didn't know that at the time. Very similar incidents have happened at my family doctor's office and at hospitals. How should we handle this? Should I interrupt and say something? Should Agnes, my wife, say something? I don't want to be rude. These people are generally quite nice to me, and I'm happy with their work. Would really appreciate your suggestions. Thanks so much." Thank you for raising this issue, David. It is something that I'm sure many of us can relate to. When I was married to somebody sighted, it did happen to me quite a bit. My sighted wife was pretty onto this, and she would just say to them, "Look, you don't need to tell me his private medical details. He's a grown man. He can cope with all of this himself, but thanks," and we'd move on. I think there are a couple of approaches you can take. It reminds me, actually, not so much of a medical story, but it's an interesting one, where I used to pick up my daughter, my oldest daughter, Heidi, from kindergarten. And in New Zealand, kindergarten is where kids go before the age of 5, from about the age of 2 until they're 5. And I used to walk there with my guide dog and pick her up, and we would walk home, and it was a really pleasant walk. And one day, the kindergarten teacher made some sort of comment to Heidi, like, "You are doing a really great job looking after your daddy like this." And it was quite undermining and humiliating. And I knew, though, that if I raised it at the time, if I reacted immediately, it would make Heidi feel really uncomfortable, and she was just a little girl, and she didn't have to deal with all of this. So we walked home, and then I sought a one-on-one meeting with the teacher, and I explained that I'm the caregiver in this relationship. My blindness doesn't change that fact. And if she sought to undermine my parental role in that way ever again, I would remove Heidi from the kindergarten and I would make a formal complaint. And it never happened again. I mean, it was all very nicely done, no aggression in it, but just stating very clearly the consequences of undermining my parental authority that way. So I think in this instance, where you know that people mean well, what I would do is just either have a chat if you can, give them a phone call and discuss it, and say, "Look, I don't want to make a big deal of this. I know you meant well, but you've really undermined my privacy here, and you've got a misconception about me as a blind person," and just have a genuine chat. And what will probably happen is that the dentist will say, "I'm so sorry, I never thought of it from that perspective. Thank you for pointing it out to me." And then you'll probably be able to move on, and the dentist will have appreciated the discussion, and perhaps you will have done someone a favor who might not have been able to raise it in such a constructive way and who felt humiliated and undermined, because your medical details are sacrosanct, aren't they? And it's so undermining to have that discussion in a waiting room, and really they have no right to talk to someone else about your medical information unless you've given them power of attorney and various other caveats like that. So that's how I would personally handle it. I'm sure others have comments on this and similar experiences to share. It is so frustrating, though, that a lot of these things happen to us when we're at our most vulnerable. You know, we go and see the medical profession because we need some medical attention, and that does make the situation more complex. Great contribution from David Vandermolen, and indeed a great contribution from everybody that we've heard from today. It's been really great, so thank you. How much can I use great in one paragraph? Thank you. Let me just remind you of a couple of things before I go. The first is that the Mosen Explosion is here right throughout the week. So if you'd like to have a chat in a music context, we do history, we just have a wee more informal chat about this and that and play lots of great music. You can join me from 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. Eastern Time every weekday. Also, the Blind Podmaker Club on Clubhouse is coming up, and that also has a Blind Podmaker podcast feed. So you can join the Blind Podmaker Club on Clubhouse. Just search for Blind Podmaker. Podmaker is all one word. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking about using Ferrite for iOS to produce and edit a podcast. You've actually got a pretty powerful lean, mean audio creating and editing machine on your iPhone right there in your pocket. How efficient is it really, though, for a blind person to edit a podcast in Ferrite? We'll be looking at that tomorrow. And you can also, as I say, subscribe to the Blind Podmaker feed as a podcast feed and get that podcast and other episodes as well. And finally, a reminder that Small World, the program that's really taken off, the kids program for the whole family, will now be 2 hours long. You can hear it for the first time at midnight on Mushroom Escape, and then it repeats 6 times, or repeats actually 5 times throughout that 24-hour period. And that wraps up Mosen at Large for another week. Thank you so much for your company. Stay tuned on Mushroom FM because Steve Cutway is right up next with the early years.
Mosen